Hello, everybody. I am Amanda Benjamin.
And I'm Paul Carganilla, and we welcome you. You don't need an invitation, you're already here at our mystifying show in which we explore mysteries of the unknown.
In this live stream and podcast, we'll tell tales of the paranormal and unsolved while mixing in a little fun and live music as well. Welcome to the Magical Mystery Hour.
If you're listening to the audio podcast of this episode, we invite you to find this show on our YouTube channel, the Vaudacity Network, where you can view any images or videos we share throughout these stories and see our faces as well.
That's right. So be sure to subscribe to the Magical Mystery Hour wherever you consume your podcasts.
This episode is sponsored by our friend Emily Thatcher. Emily brings us a quote from my favorite Disney animated film, Hunchback of Notre Dame, today, and it's from the gargoyle Laverne.
Laverne said, "Life is not a spectator sport. If watching is all you're going to do, then you're going to watch your life go by without you."
Love the quote.
That
Love
is
the theme
really
of
great.
That film. And it fits in the theme of this episode as well.
That's what I was
because we're talking
thinking.
about watching life go by.
Yes.
Time slipping away.
That's
And
amazing.
the theme of this episode is time slips.
Yes.
And as time just flies when you're having fun, this is our season 1 finale.
I
so
cannot believe it.
crazy, right?
That is unbelievable. It's perfect. I love it.
Not only is that exciting in of itself, but we have a very exciting special guest with us today. She is the host of the wildly popular Titanic podcast called Unsinkable, the Titanic podcast, and she's joining us from North Carolina. I hope I got that right this time. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming LA Beadles.
Woo!
Hi, thank you guys for having me. Anyone who listens to my show knows that my secondary and barely secondary, they're probably equal interest, is haunted history and anything paranormal. So this is my first time on another podcast that's in that realm. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Yay. That's so
glad
exciting.
you could join us. I love that you love ghost stories, and one of the first episodes of Unsinkable that I listened to was one of like Titanic ghosts, and I was like, oh, she's it. And then like you mentioned, you watch like the ghost hunter shows and everything, and I was like, yes, we have so much in common.
Oh yes, 100%. Well, I think you saw my post about the Mothman Festival a couple of months ago
Yes,
too,
I
and
saw
I think
Paul
we
said
realized we
that.
had. Yeah, you guys did an episode on Mothman, right?
Yes, one of the earlier
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah.
And that's one of my, I just love that story. I can never decide.
And of course, as everybody's out there listening in the live chat, we say hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today on a midday on a Wednesday.
I know.
And let us know, because it's always difficult to tell how we're coming through on the YouTube feed. If we need to do any audio adjustments, if
Yes,
anybody's louder than
please
anybody
let
else,
us
anybody needs to come
know.
up or down, of course, as always, let us know. But welcome. Thank you for being here, Rom.
Woo.
Kelsey's jumping in from her vacation in Texas.
Texas.
Angelica's here. Susan, Dari, my mom. Hi, mommy. Mom alert. Mom alert.
Hi.
I think that John is my husband. So wait, maybe did you say John?
Rom. I said Rom.
Oh, never mind. No, okay.
Tell
Well,
John, jump in the live chat. Say
Yeah.
hello. Thank you.
he may not be
Listen.
able to. He's working too, but I think he and my daughter are watching, so that's
Oh,
fun.
yay.
And Angela Dills, welcome to the show. Thank you
Welcome.
Hey,
for-
Angela. Angela's my friend.
Woo.
Hey, Angela.
Welcome.
Barbara Boardman. Hello. All right.
Hi.
Everybody's here. I mean, for being midday,
I know.
Thanksgiving
So excited.
Eve, we have a nice
Yay.
crowd with us to hear some stories about time slips. Now, this is such an interesting. I was just talking before you got here, Amanda. LA and I were talking
Right.
behind the scenes
Because
about
I was having,
how-
too many technical issues to be behind the scenes this morning.
Of course. But about like the wealth of stories, time slip stories that are out there, and it's
Mhm.
something like you never really think about. But until you suggested this as a theme, Amanda, like I dove into this rabbit hole that just kept going and going and going. And
Right?
I couldn't believe how many people in the world have had these experiences and want to share them. It's
I
crazy.
know. Yes.
We got a couple of famous ones, I think, that you guys are gonna y'all will tell those stories. I've got a trio of short stories and a little cherry to put on top of those as well. So,
and mine actually has an update. So at the end of mine, there's a pretty current update. There's a podcast that actually uncovered some information about one of them that may or may not kind of confirm something that happened. So
I'm excited to hear that.
It's exciting. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, we'll jump into it. And as we do every episode, we mix in a little live music with the storytelling. I always have the honor of going first and breaking the ice. So
I like that. Makes me feel
I was so stuck on what to do. I woke up this morning not knowing what song to do. And then I was making the kids breakfast and I was telling them, I was like, I got to figure out what song I'm going to do. And Everly asked me what the theme was. And I said, have you ever heard of Time Slips? And she was like, no, what's that? So I said, you find yourself just suddenly in a different time or a different place. You're just like lost somewhere and you have no idea. And she suggested this song. And it was one that I remember I wanted to do maybe a year or two ago on a live show, but I just couldn't work it out. It's pretty challenging on guitar. But I was like, I'll take a look at it again since I've been playing so much since then and see if I could swing it. And I'm going to try. And
That's the same thing I did with mine. I was like, oop, I'm trying it live. So that we'll do it live. Because LA's never been with us. That's kind of how we do it.
And I'm just along for this beautiful ride to see you guys perform. I do not sing. And I told Paul in a message yesterday, or both of you in a message yesterday, my children don't even want to hear me sing. Nobody wants that. So I am just part of the audience for this part, and I'm in awe of your talents. So I'm excited.
I'm always excited to hear Paul's songs. So.
And we try it live, and if it sucks, we can re-record it.
We re-record.
Gotcha.
Here is a little ditty from Frozen 2 called Lost in the Woods. Again you go on a different path than mine. I'm left behind, wondering if I should follow. You had to go, and of course it's always fine. I probably could catch up with you tomorrow. But is this what it feels like to be growing apart? When did I become the one who's always chasing your heart? Now I turned around to find I am lost in the woods. North is south, right is left when you're gone. I'm the one who sees you home, but now I'm lost in the woods, and I don't know what path you are on. I'm lost in the woods. Up till now, the next step was a question of how. I never thought it was a question of whether. Who am I if I'm not your guy? Where am I if we're not together forever? Now I know you're my true north, 'cause I'm lost in the woods. Wow, up is down, right is left. Here we go again. Now I know you're my true north, 'cause I'm lost in the woods. Up is down, day is night when you're not there. Oh, you're my only landmark, 'cause I'm lost in the woods, wondering if you still care. But I'll wait for a sign that I'm your path, 'cause you are mine. But till then, I'm lost in the woods. I'm lost in the woods. I'm lost in the woods. And I will definitely be re-recording that. But thank you for listening to me chunk it live.
Yay! I forgot.
It's fun. It's such a fun song, and I love the love it in the movie with the late 80s, 90s boy band vibe.
It's so good. I actually kind of prefer Frozen 2, and I might be in the minority on that, but I can't remember. I think when it came out, the reviews were mixed, but I really loved it. I thought
it was great.
I thought the music was top notch. Yeah.
Yeah.
And didn't we discover when we were recording, was it the Mothman episode, that like there's a storyline that's very similar to Frozen 2 from that area? It was like the native people, and then they backstabbed, and then
I'm sure. I don't remember where we figured that out, but yes.
I think I remember something like that from listening to your episode. So I think so. Anyway, I can't remember anything else, but I think you're
Love it.
Recording in progress.
Sorry.
Oh, good.
I realized that I wasn't recording. I was like, oh no. Just in case.
Well, finding yourself lost anywhere is a big part of the theme that we picked today. Lost in time, lost in place, lost in space. And I'm excited to hear what you chose, what story you chose to tell us all about, Amanda.
Yes. I knew we had a guest, first of all, so I was like, I'm going to try and keep it short. Shorter anyways. Because if you watch, my stories are usually a little over an hour, and I was like, okay. But I found this story, more time travel than time slip, but there is some really interesting stuff in there. So I decided to tell the story of the person who became dubbed a madman, Mike Marcum.
I have no clue what this is about. I've never heard of it before, so I'm excited.
It is a very interesting story. And I am going to have to add my background music in post because I forgot to pull it up. So it's actually a little easier that way anyways.
Sure, mixing wise, yeah.
I just like to have my mood music as I read.
Well, we're all here for it.
All right. So again, this is the story of Mike Marcum. So, have you ever woken up in the middle of the night out of such a deep sleep that for a moment reality itself just slips away for a minute? Like perhaps you've experienced that panic before everything comes back to you. Now picture this. You awaken not in the comfort of your bed, but in the vast expanse of an unfamiliar field. You have no recollection of how you arrived, who you are, or even the people that you hold dear. Life, once crystal clear, is now shrouded in a thick and impenetrable fog.
I had a couple mornings like that in college once.
Yes.
I was about to say, I had that happen when I fell asleep after a long day parenting and was in that twilight, moment of half awake, half asleep. And I couldn't remember what day or time it was.
Right.
And I don't know, I guess that maybe that's not normal. I chalked it up to routine, but
No, I've actually had it happen too. Like
it.
in the middle of the night, I've woken up. It's happened to me just, I think like twice. And I think it's just because I was so deep asleep. But like I wake up and there was literally nothing in my brain. Like no thought. Like, cause my brain is just always going, right? There's like no thought in my brain. It takes me a second to be able to form words. Cause I was told like I have an internal monologue, right? So like I form words in my brain. So my brain's like for a second. And I'm like, where am I? And what am I doing? And what? And then all of a sudden it's all right back. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it's the scariest experience.
I don't know any of the technical terms for it, but I do think that there are words. I think it's a very common kind of human moment, that there exists this sliver of time and space where you kind of are, and it's creepy to say, but you are sort of like nothing until you come back to your own consciousness and put the pieces
Right.
together in your brain. It's kind of scary, but I think that the brain sort of has those lapses,
Yeah.
and gaps once in a while.
Yeah, it's scary.
And I think
It's very
especially, like,
scary.
right after you're waking up when there is that fog, and
Uh-huh.
sometimes it's a lot harder to get through it
Yeah.
than others.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I can imagine like waking up in a field and feeling just enveloped in that.
Yes. So you've just entered the world of Mike Marcum, an engineering student residing in the small town of Stansbury, Missouri, who found himself thrust into the unknown, awakening in the year 2000 with no memory of his past. Join me on this riveting tale as we unravel his story of how he navigated uncharted territories. Mysteries abound, and the answers lie in the twists and turns of Mike Marcum's extraordinary journey. Now, before we embark on our voyage of Madman Mike Marcum, as he would later be dubbed, the time traveler, let's get to know a bit about him. Before he became the figure that I just introduced that we know, or if you don't yet, you will get to know, Mike Marcum was an engineering student in Missouri, and contrary to popular belief, his venture into the realm of time travel didn't initially stem from a desire for untold riches and lottery numbers, as many people reported. I've listened to about 5 hours of Mike discussing his time machine and motivations, and that's not what he claims. In fact, according to Mike, it all started with a simple wish to create something visually captivating. In 1995, Mike set out to construct what's called a Jacob's ladder. This is a device with two poles conducting this mesmerizing spark of electricity from top to bottom. So you have like these two poles like this, and the electric goes bzz, and comes back down, goes bzz, comes back down. We've all seen something like that before. And to achieve this, Mike actually wound and made his own high voltage transformer box. He had to make his own because American houses don't come close to delivering the 120 or 240 volts that you would need. So he glued together two metal plates and wound 450 turns of wire to his primary coil and 4,000 in his secondary coil. And when you put these together, you get 20,000 volts. So not for the faint of heart and not for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. That's a lot of voltage.
He's not planning on like jumping into this thing, is he?
The Jacob's ladder, no. He's just like, hey, this will look cool. He's always
Okay.
really liked technology. He's liked engineering. He likes to tinker with things. Like his whole backyard was just full of old electronics that didn't work anymore. He would take them apart, put them together, try to make something new. So this is just stuff that he always did. And so he's like, one day he said, okay, I want to make that. And he actually used wire hangers for the poles. And he, like I said, he made his own transformer box for the power. And he decided that to make it even more impressive looking and to make it work consistently, that he would use the laser from a CD player for heat. Okay. So he put this at the bottom of the machine. And so the laser would heat the air around it, making less air resistance. So like I said, it would look better. It would work consistently. It would be a good way to start the spark. It was great. But little did he know that this artistic endeavor would lead to the discovery that defied explanation. As Mike flipped the switch, the machine surpassed his wildest expectations. Mark noticed that there was a peculiar heat mark, kind of resembling a sphere, that just appeared above the device. Intrigued, Mike tossed a sheet metal screw into the vortex, and the unimaginable happened. It vanished just for about half a second, only to reappear and then fall down onto the table. He repeated the experiment. His results were replicated, and Mike's excitement surged This was inexplicable, unlike anything he'd ever dreamed of. The machine was giving off so much heat, though, that he was actually burning his legs as he was doing this experiment. He was standing close, but he was just so excited.
The sacrifices we make for art.
Right? Exactly.
just a few third degree burns on the
Fine.
shins. No big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, he couldn't help himself. He was like, I'm gonna do it again and again and again. I mean, I would too, right? If I was watching.
I guess if you're staring into this abyss that you've somehow created that defies all human logic, then probably you may not notice the burning sensation on your legs. I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So he realized in that moment, as he watched the screw, that he might have actually just created a time machine. What he thought is that the screw was actually blinking into the future really quickly and that he was catching up, less than a second later. So it disappeared, go in the future. Less than a second later, he would meet back up with it and then it would fall down. And this makes sense because if it was like a teleporter, I mean, it makes sense as far as coming to this conclusion, because if it was something like a teleporter or something that, just disappeared, made it invisible, it would end up on the table before it reappeared, right?
I feel like
drop it and
I feel like you go into that whole thought or discussion about parallel universes immediately, because I feel like if it disappeared and went into the future, now it's on its own course. Like, what brings it back to your...
Yeah, what force is acting on it to bring it back? And then there's also, I mean, I know nothing about physics at all. My husband's probably chuckling right now. But I know that, right, the rule is like if something takes up space, if something takes up matter, it's got to take that. I mean, it's got to be also taking up that matter somewhere else too. Mm-hmm. So then it's a physics conversation. It's a multiple dimension conversation. It's a time travel conversation. I mean, there's 100 ways you could go and even talking about speculating about this on any level.
And actually, just to kind of tag along with that, because I don't think I put this in later because there's so many things you can talk about. But I listened to a bunch of his interviews and they were in call-in shows, which we'll talk about later. But something somebody said is exactly that. They're like, is it going to a parallel universe? Is it actually the same screw that came back? Like, did you check the threading? Did you test it to see if it was the same metals? And he's like, no, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Somebody had mentioned maybe like if the screws were all going to the right, maybe now they're all going to the left. And he's like, well, no, I don't have it anymore. I don't know.
In hindsight,
yeah, right.
I should have been checking that.
Exactly. So he does discuss in some of the interviews a little bit about the possibility of parallel universes, but I think that's kind of beyond. He's more of the engineer side. Like, I made this machine.
I just
I created it.
Holes that go into the abyss. Exactly. I don't know anything else about
don't ask me anything else. Oh man.
It's it reminds me of that. Has anyone watched Gravity Falls?
Oh my gosh, animated? Yes. I love that
it
show.
Sort of reminds me of like the whole, like what's in the basement, like the whole, the whole, like, multiverse of, I don't know. It makes me think of like Dipper and Mabel headed into the.
Yes, it does. It does. And Bill Cipher is doing it all.
Bill Cipher. Oh, his voice. My whole family, we love the show, but that voice, I can't, the Bill Cipher's voice, it triggers me more than anything in the world, but I think it's supposed to, because he's supposed to represent like multi-dimensional evil.
Yes. And then just one other really quick side tangent. I work at a school because you will know what this is. I work at a school and there was a wall and it was some kind of art project, but it was all these triangles and the kids decorated the triangles and a couple kids put little arms and legs. But they're little. They're like first grade. I don't know if they're watching Gravity Falls, but it was a really common thing. And one of them put an eye in there.
Oh, yeah. They must. I mean, it's
because they were like watching. It was supposed to be like reflective of an artist. So it also might have been that the artist had done, things like that. I don't know. But it was very strange. I walked by and I was like, is this a wall of Bill Cipher's, which has happened?
I mean, my daughter's only 7 and she's watched it through twice, and
I
mean, she gets it all. Yeah, it's one of those that works no matter what age you are, I feel like. But
it's a great show.
Anyway, sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. It made me that's the visual that came to mind for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, realizing that something incredible was going on, Mike turned off the machine since it was really hot. and hastily reached for a camera to capture this inexplicable phenomenon. Yet, as fate would have it, the adventure took a turn. When Mike powered the machine up again, the laser caught fire, rendering the contraption inoperable. It was very hot.
Yeah, not shocking.
I know, exactly. Like, you're getting burns on your legs. It's, yeah.
200,000 volts or whatever it was. Yeah.
20,000. It's still
yeah.
Let me guess. He wanted to build another, but bigger and stronger.
How did you know?
With the mind of a madman. I
Yes.
think.
So Mike is not one to be down for long. Undeterred by setbacks, he decided to rebuild this time machine from the ground up. But this time, he dreamed bigger and bolder. Why settle for the ordinary when you can go for the extraordinary? As the gears of inspiration turned, Mike realized that he needed an electrifying upgrade. The catch? A colossal demand for power. But how do you feed the appetite of an insatiable machine? With 20,000 volts providing insufficient power, Mike delved into the world of Transformers, only to be hit with a jaw-dropping price tag of over $2,500 for each Transformer. Which, again, in 1995 money, I should have done the conversion. I don't know what it is, but that's 1995 money. So a lot.
Not the Transformer like Optimus Prime. We're talking electric.
Hey, if it was only $2,500 for an Optimus Prime,
I think a lot of people would be running around with their personal Optimus Prime. Yeah.
I know.
I'm sorry. I just can't process that 1995 was so long ago that we need to run an inflation
I
calculator.
know. To be fair, we need like an inflation calculator from like 5 years ago.
Yeah,
inflation is wild.
I only when I do research for my podcast, I run it if it's like, it's like 1912, but now I'm like, wow, yeah, I guess 95. We probably need to run it to see what it costs. Yeah. Yeah.
That was pre-Titanic.
What was pre-Titanic?
1995.
Yeah.
Oh God, you mean the movie?
I know. I thought that's what I did at first. I was like, huh? Oh, I get it.
My 13-year-old mind hadn't been blown by James Cameron's masterpiece yet. I still think of the 90s as like 10 years ago. I know that's a whole thing on like Instagram and TikTok where people are surprised, but I guess 30 years ago. So
according to CPI inflation calculator, $2,500 in 1995 is the equivalent of $5,047.10 today.
Oh my God.
A doubling?
Doubled it.
Wow.
Okay. See, I'm always telling my 80-year-old father, like, this is why everything is so, I'm always like the proportion of income to what you used to spend on things. I need to show him that example to prove this point. Wild. That proves all of our points in our generation of like why we can't afford to do anything or why everything's like,
I just want to buy a power transformer. Okay.
Yeah. Gosh, I certainly couldn't.
I know.
Wow. Okay. Good to know.
He needs a couple of $5,000 Transformers to build version 2.
Mm-hmm.
And remind me, is he under the employment of a university? Is he?
No, he had been a student for a couple years. At this point, he was working kind of at a shop or factory in the town.
Okay.
So he's kind of like a normal little job.
He's funding his own research at this point.
Yes.
Okay.
Using as much things as he has, but so he made his own transformer the first time. He used wire coat hangers. But now he realized he can't really do this bigger version on the cheap. But he was undeterred. Our Maverick hatched a daring plan. He had a memory from his daily drive that there were actually 6 transformers just languishing by the side of the road near a power substation, just gathering dust.
Languishing.
Yes. Seizing the opportunity, Mike enlisted 2 accomplices to join him to pick up these transformers at 11 in the morning. Not even in the cover of night. They just drove over, picked him up, loaded him in the car. And now he probably needed 2 or 3 at most, but he took all 6.
Go big, bro.
I know, go big or go
Also,
home.
why would you want to use the ones that were left on the side of the road? There's obviously something wrong and potentially dangerous with these. Why would you? I guess he knew how to work with
He
that.
did.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
he probably figured like he could, and maybe that's why he took all. I mean, that's not why he said he took all 6. Basically, he said he just got greedy. But I guess taking all 6 would give you a better shot at getting good ones, because my guess is that they would take these out. They would replace the transformers before they die, right? Because you can't have like a transformer die and everybody gets their power out. So my guess is he's thinking these are just here. They just stopped using them. I don't know. But he couldn't resist it. And like I said, and at 11 in the morning, it wasn't even like, hey, 3:30 a.m. Let's go.
I mean, to be fair, if you saw someone transporting Transformers, you would probably assume they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
You know, like who would, like a petty thief would take
As long as you're wearing an orange reflective vest, you can
That's it. Yeah, you could just put on a uniform and someone would just assume you knew what you were, or you were authorized to do what you were doing.
Khakis, a button down, and a reflective vest. You're good.
It's true. And yeah, these were heavy too. You said the biggest one weighed about 350 pounds. So yeah, it would have been a lot of work.
A lot of work. It's a lot of manpower and accomplices
It is.
as well. Yeah.
Now, armed with the tools of his electrifying trade, Mike proceeded to build his bigger machine. The new poles would be made out of 3/8 inch thick metal and were about 4 feet tall. He wired the 2 transformers together, then hooked the primary up to the poles and the secondary to the power coming out of the house. The result, Mike's power went out. Oops. And not only that, but he caused a brownout that actually spread through several blocks from his house. So, not good. But it seemed okay the next day. Power was fine. Everybody came back. So they're just brownouts. So, you know, it was okay. They fixed it all. But yikes. I'd imagine they started looking into that. He was missing a key component to the equipment, though. He hadn't been able to procure the new laser. So he really would have been unable to completely replicate the vortex in all likelihood. So he scheduled a time to pick up a laser, but here's kind of where 2 stories of this get a little twisted. Some people claim that he did get it working again and that he pushed a couch through. Another story says that he got this one working and he was showing it off to his friends, and the friends put the couch through when he wasn't there. He didn't know if it was a prank or if it actually worked. And he kind of sort of touches on it in the interviews, but it's unclear. There is a story that he has said did not happen, though, when somebody said that he pushed a couch through this machine and the cat disappeared forever. He said that did not happen. I did not put a cat through the time machine. Just clearing that up.
So the story. So there's speculation that his friends secretly threw an entire couch.
So he was
couch.
The story of that one is that he had friends over. He the way that he tells it, he didn't actually specify if the machine had been working, and that's why I'm not 100% sure. But he said that his friends were over and he left the room, and I assume they knew what he was doing. He left the room to grab something, and when he came back, his couch was gone. And so he's like, is this a prank? Like, he thought it was a prank because he was telling them about the time machine. He's like, this is a prank.
Did the couch ever reappear?
No, he never found it.
So the couch could be in like 19th century France.
It could be. Who knows?
Hey, bro, remember that one time we were so wasted on wine coolers we made your couch disappear?
Or what about the drunk people sitting around in like a college dorm room and then a couch like just appeared?
And they're like,
You
hey,
know,
we
like,
needed
what?
one of those.
Like it's like a 1972 in a dorm room at like Cal State or something like in the.
I picture an old man on a dinghy just fly fishing, or just in a river fly fishing, and then a couch just.
pops down. Well, because that's the time, like, I mean, the time slip definition, right, is accidental time travel.
Yeah.
So that's what he's creating, or what he claims he's creating, is essentially a time slip for an object.
Yeah. It's weird. So
what if the cat did go in and then the cat came back and the cat can't talk, but in its mind, it's like, gosh, the things I've seen, you know, but like you can't.
You can't, no.
Can't talk to them. So, yeah.
Yeah. So to me, I'm like, man, that's got to be a prank. But I don't know. Like I said, then there's different versions of the story that fly around. And the one that I heard him interview about, it still wasn't clear whether or not the machine had been working at the time. But just so, you know, I wanted to address that. But but we know for sure that at some point a visitor came to his house. It's like a friend of a friend or family friend or something came to his house, and he brought a BB gun with him. And I guess as you do in Missouri in 95, I don't know, he started like shooting at birds, which, like, excuse me, but whatever.
Yeah, that's
I don't know.
But I think you're right. I think, like, you know, Missouri in 1995, I wouldn't be shocked if people were doing that.
I know. It's just one of those like cultural things. Like hunting is way bigger, you know, on that side of the country than it is here. And a lot of kids did that as boys, you know, so I'll give it to you. But so he was shooting, you know, trying to shoot the BB gun at birds. And he unintentionally fired a shot into the sliding screen door of a neighbor's house. Eventually, the police started investigating, and that person actually told them that Mike had the 6 Transformers at his house. He ratted him out because he believed that, you know, Mike gave him up or something. It's supposedly like a eye for an eye type thing. So they got a search warrant, and one night Mike awoke to find himself surrounded by a bunch of policemen in his bed, right? Like, so he's in his bed. A bunch of policemen are surrounding his bed and just ready to arrest him for the theft.
Did he didn't live alone, did he? Like, they can't just come into your house for a property crime.
That's what he said. He said, well, but the thing is, these Transformers were worth $13,000. So it's not just a little crime. That's a major
theft. But police still
felony,
just come into your house.
I don't know. He said that he left his door unlocked.
But they're not. Are they allowed to just walk in?
Don't ask me. This is his story.
Somebody had to let them in. Like, maybe he was living with somebody.
Yeah, I don't know.
Answered the door and they were like, "Hey, is this guy here? Can we talk to him?"
I don't know. Yeah, that's
or the time traveling cat.
Yeah. Now he can talk, and he's like, "Come on in, officers." He's over there.
Come this way.
The officers were unfazed.
I'll get you back, Mike.
On January 29th, he confessed that he was building a time machine. I'm sure he got some interesting looks for that one. He was subsequently arrested and served 60 days in prison. His dreams.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Again, it's a huge theft.
I mean, he did
$13,000 back then. Again, is going to be over $26,000 today. That's a lot.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So 60 days. After his time in prison, Mike knew that he had to make some changes if he wanted to continue his quest to build a time machine. No more, childish, impulsive thinking. He would have to do everything by the book this time. The problem was he was on 5 years probation, unemployed, and pretty much homeless.
Sorry, none of this should be funny.
It's incredible. Like, if you,
he's a man with a dream. He's a man with a dream.
He is.
He's following his heart's fire. He's just listening to that burning.
He's saying yes.
He is, yes. Right. So yeah, he needed a place to live. He had no money, no job, nothing. But favor fortunes the bold. Mike's venture had actually led to news articles that had circulated throughout the media and caught the attention of a radio broadcaster, Art Bell. Art reached out to Mike to talk about his experiments, and he was just riveted by what he heard, and he was not the only one. So he was, Mike was on his show. He talked, the first time he just talked about basically everything that I told you. And several listeners called into the show to express how impressed they were with Mike's knowledge of the subject. And when you listen, he's sounds like I'm not wise enough in this topic to say, yes, I completely 100%. Everything that I read, it all lines up. You know, everything that he said, all the math all checked out. It was great. And so everybody's like, wow, you're really knowledgeable about this. You know what you're talking about. Like, and they started asking questions about how things work. And let's see. I actually lost my whole little spot now. He did talk in detail. So I said that. He talked about in detail how he achieved this. A few callers said, please contact me regarding this. I can help you. One person even called in and offered him several transformers. The spark of passion was ignited once more, and Mike was ready to rebuild. This time, he had equipment. He had a garage in Overland, Kansas to work in. Everything was donated by listeners from this radio program who became his sponsors. Even the head chairman of the physics department of the University of Missouri at Kansas said that he looked into his work and it really seemed credible and in line with research being done by theoretical physicists at the time.
Just goes to show you, everybody, when you have a dream, you got to put it out there into the universe. You got to speak it out loud and show people what your dream is. And then the universe will produce people in your life that can help you achieve that.
Right?
Yeah.
It's incredible. So Mike gave an update about a year later, a little over a year later, in 1996 on the Art Bell Show, saying that the machine, if all goes well, right, no setbacks, would be ready in about a month. And that all of his sponsors from the previous show were all involved in the building and any experiments that would happen. So they were always welcome in the shop. They could be part of anything. They could discuss with him. They were all just part of it now. And once again, Mike was making improvements on his original design. Firstly, while his original machine used 20,000 volts, this one would crank it up to a whopping 3 million volts. Unbelievable amount of energy. 3 million volts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
He went on to explain that he started to believe that the heat from the laser in his original machine, combined with the cool night air outside his apartment where he was tinkering, actually made this sort of tornado effect. Okay, and that would react with the electric arcs that were sparking, which are basically plasma. Okay, so the plasma is created by the arcs. And that would create something that he described as a plasma tornado. So the plasma tornado is something that you can actually see on the sun. Okay, if you've ever seen those pictures of the sun and it's like this whirling thing that goes up from the surface of the sun, those are plasma tornadoes. Obviously the sun is like all plasma, so it just happens all the time. But he's saying that this extreme heat with the cold, that's what made it happen. More scientifically, convection currents and swirling magnetic fields create these vortices, along which the plasma swirls. So, and you can see it in small scale times too. But again, the biggest thing you can see is the sun. So he decided in this new machine to take it a step further. The plasma would be rotated in a tornado this time by a rotating magnetic field. So he put a bunch of magnets underneath that rotate, and they each have, each like magnet has like 7 kind of fields that it creates. So there's a very strong magnetic field that's constantly rotating, and that would interact with the plasma to make this plasma tornado, which he believes causes the vortex to open at the top of the machine.
Clearly.
I was like, I had to look at this. I had to look it up and be like, what exactly is this?
I'll take his word for it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, none of it makes any sense to me in technically speaking, but
Yeah.
I trust you did a great job describing it. It sounds great.
Yeah, like I said, I had to look it up. I like talked it through and I was like, this makes sense. And I was talking with David about it. I was like, okay, because I was like, I don't get what this is. And he's like, well, maybe. And so we talked about it. And then I looked up videos like based on what we did. And I was like, hey, like, yeah, okay, I get it. But how this equates to time travel, I couldn't figure that one out. But that's how Mike Marcum claimed it worked. So Mike said that he was going to run some more experiments once the machine was up and running. He was going to place various objects in the vortex. He would, start small, move bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually, he would want to move kind of through a cycle of life, like insects to start with, make sure they came out fine. He would move on to hamsters, any other, things. As long as it's going, he could keep moving up until he went through. He didn't want to send anybody else through because he felt like if something happened to them, it would be murder. He said, even if it's not technically, even if there was never a body, he said, I don't know what happens to them and I can't live with that.
That liability contract would be like worse than Ocean Gates.
Yeah, even in the interviews, he had people call in. When there was one man, he said he was a priest, and he's like, I want to go through. I will do it. And he's like, no.
People are wild. What? I can't. I mean, I think that there are just some people in the world that have that adventurous spirit, but I can't connect with whatever that impulse is. Like, I can't believe that someone would volunteer to do that.
I want to see like 100 people go in and all come out okay before I will even consider.
100, 1,000, a million.
Yeah.
I don't want to be alpha, beta, whatever. It's I want to be phase 17, where after thousands of people have come safely back.
That's true.
That's crazy.
That priest had faith.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I guess he's got his faith, so he's good to go.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was interesting. But so yeah, he knew that was what he eventually wanted for himself. He also told people that he couldn't bring anything metallic through with him, because they could react with the electricity. If he brought a phone with him, it would probably be fried, right? By the time he got there, credit cards, IDs, anything like that with magnetic strips, they'd be toast. There's also, he said, a possibility, because he doesn't, know, buttons on jeans could conduct electricity and possibly electrocute him. So he wasn't bringing anything metallic with him when he went through. He did have an idea. If he made some kind of Faraday cage, if he went through in a tube somehow, that maybe he could bring a phone with him, but he hadn't worked on that part of the experiment yet. So, in a mysterious turn of events, after this interview with Mike Marcum, I don't know exactly the dates but it was sometime after the interview, Mike just vanished.
No.
Art Bell tried to find him. He was calling, his phone number didn't work anymore. The people went to his house. He wasn't there. He wasn't in the shop.
No, this is the latest update.
This is not the latest update.
Oh, okay.
But this is after his second interview with Art Bell.
Okay.
So eventually, 2 years passed. Art Bell still hadn't heard from him. Nobody's seen him at all. Nothing. Mike appeared to have vanished completely off the face of the planet. At one point, somebody called Art Bell's show, and he claimed that he found an old newspaper article about a man from the 1930s on a beach crushed by a metal tube with a rectangular metallic object. But this turned out to be untrue. It was very different circumstances.
I really wanted that to be true.
I
did
really
too.
wanted that. I had like goosebumps, and I really wanted that to be
when
real.
I saw that, I was like, oh, and they're like, no, that wasn't it. And I'm like, dang it. Well, just when all hope seemed to be lost, Mike Marcum emerged from the shadows with a tale so astonishing it sent shivers down the spines of paranormal enthusiasts everywhere. 2 years later, after successfully running experiments, Mike noticed a few things. So this is going back, right? So he's still testing the big machine. Every object that he tossed into the vortex vanished, which he knew already. But now that he had the power cranked up, he noticed that they would appear 50 to 150 yards away from where he threw it in. And only east to west, never north to south. However, whether it was east or west was random. He couldn't figure out why east, why west. He would just toss them again and it would go one way or the other. He did notice, though, that the distance that it reappeared depended on the size of the object, but more so the voltage that he used. So he could really start to reliably predict where things were going to be, which when he started using things like hamsters was good because they run fast. So he would have his people, that were working with him go out to where it should appear and grab the animals and bring them back. Crazy.
Sorry, these little hamsters.
I know. I was like, I can't believe it's poor little hamsters.
I'm imagining the employees at PetSmart going,
you need more hamsters?
More hamsters, sir? Okay.
Yeah. Mike never talked about, at least in the interviews I've seen, Mike has never talked about the, like if any of the animals died, when he did it. As far as everything he mentioned, everything came back fine. I don't know if it was 100% success rate or not, but hopefully. So, the pinnacle of this whole journey came when Mike Marcum, the fearless inventor, decided to take the ultimate leap through the vortex. With the machine cranked up to maximum power, and he wanted to make sure it was maximum power because this thing, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, is pretty high off the ground. The machine, I'm trying to think. The machine, I forget if it was 8 or 10 feet tall, but it was also up on blocks, and there were cylinders and magnets, right? So it's up pretty high. And so if he goes and falls through, not only is he going to possibly land on something electrified, if that doesn't happen, that's going to be a huge fall onto like concrete. Mm-hmm. So he turned it all the way up as high as he could. And he got up in a cherry picker. He aligned himself with the heart of the vortex. And the seconds leading up to this jump must have just felt like an eternity. But he took a deep breath and leapt from the cherry picker bucket, propelling himself into the unknown. There was a flash of bright light, and he woke up in the middle of an unfamiliar field, his memory wiped clean. Stricken with the worst headache of his life, Mike looked around and realized that no one was in sight. He got on his feet and slowly stumbled toward what he hoped was a town. Eventually, he found a homeless shelter where he could eat and rest his weary body, and slowly fragments of his memory began to return. He remembered his name, and then eventually that he had built a time machine and hoped to time travel. But he began to think that maybe he actually had invented a teleporter. Everything appeared to be in the same era that he found himself in. That was until he picked up a newspaper and was hit with the shock of his life. It was the year 2000, just over 2 years after his last conscious moment. And stranger still, Mike hadn't aged a day. He didn't grow a beard. His hair was the same length. His clothes and his shoes were all in perfect condition. No new wrinkles on his face. He had no idea how it could be other than time travel. And it got even more bizarre when he realized that he was 800 miles from his shop in Kansas. He ended up in a small town in Ohio.
Ohio is creepy. I don't know if you've ever looked into how
I don't know
many
if I've been to. I mean,
there's
if I've.
so many ghost stories about Ohio, and there's so many
Oh, yeah.
like people say there's a lot of portals in Ohio.
Oh, so
Ohio
it
is
makes
a very
sense.
creepy state. So this just further confirms that. My son called Ohio sus. He said, "I just feel like Ohio is very sus."
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Ohio.
Ohio.
After getting back on his feet, Mike traveled back to the garage. Returning to his former life revealed an even darker twist. The garage, the epicenter of the groundbreaking experiments, was wiped clean. He realized that the remnants of his once revolutionary time machine may have met their fate in a cold, indifferent landfill. This machine, if it existed, could still be somewhere in a landfill. Or maybe the copper wires were stripped and sold. It could be that the metal pieces were melted for scraps. But it's just so sad to think that this thing that possibly could have revolutionized the human race could just be.
So he disappeared. He's not paying his rent. The landlord comes in and gets rid of all his stuff. And now somebody else has his.
Are there photos of it, or is there any documentation about that residence having existed? Like I guess
I know.
Like my first thought is like, is this maybe a mental health issue? Like
I had
my
the same
first thought is like,
mm-hmm.
yeah. And so, do we have any proof of any of the mechanisms of it?
So he has said that the people that he was working with, his sponsors, were filming. They did take pictures and everything. But so far he hasn't been able to find anybody. And I'll get into that in a sec. The other thing I wanted to say was that somebody did call in because Mike went back on the Art Bell show for a third time, which is really interesting because if you ever look up the story, probably 90% of the videos end with Mike's time travel. And they say, and he disappeared forever and he's gone. But he did go on and do a third interview. Or it even ends before the time travel. It'll end with the beach story. Like, but that wasn't
which doesn't have any, like you said, there's no legs to that story anyway.
So he, went back on the Art Bell show, and there was somebody who called in actually and said, I am a broker. I'm a real estate broker. And what happens is when a tenant stops paying rent, after a certain amount of time, the landlord actually calls a company or the broker, and either one of them will call a company, and the company comes in and just trashes everything. So the broker that called in said that's probably what happened. It's an outside company, and they trash everything. They don't even look at it. They just, okay, gone. And they do it like as a service for the landlord. So that's probably what happened.
Just seems like a large and odd item to come across when you're cleaning out. And so that's why I was curious, like, are there maybe newspaper articles around the time, or I don't know. It feels like there should be some sort of physical trace of it.
Yes.
So my skeptic light is going
mine
off.
too, right? That is the flaw in the story for me.
Mm-hmm. It just seems like some picture of it should exist, just a picture, at least one.
Yeah,
definitely. If I'm creating my life's work and I'm really into this thing and proud of the work that I'm doing, I'm taking at least a picture of it.
So the only thing, as far as what pictures that he would have had, don't forget that he left everything before the lease.
Oh, that's right. So he might have possessed photos, but they would have been cleaned out.
Yes.
Yeah.
He doesn't know as far as anybody else, because other people were supposed to be recording and taking photos.
Mm-hmm.
And he also explained that the time travel, he says, like, you just have no idea what it does to your brain, because your brain, right, reacts to magnetism, right? And where everything reacts to magnetism. And he said it was so strong that he just has forgotten a lot of things. He can't remember names very well. There are certain parts of his life that he can't really remember. He does get persistent headaches. All of these things, again, he He chalks it up to being in such a strong magnetic field. He doesn't want it to stop him, but he says it's difficult to remember. He can't remember the names of his sponsors, of the donators, anything like that. During the show, they were hoping that people would get back in touch.
But he remembered going on the Art Bell show, obviously.
Yeah, well, yes. I don't,
Okay.
I'm trying, yes, he remembers a lot of things. He said that he has about 90% of his memory back, but there are gaps.
Okay.
So he said it was really hard for him. And callers called in during the show and were bringing up these exact things. And they're like, why didn't you just like go to like City Hall or a lawyer or something and say, I want to find out. He didn't even remember his landlord's name. He's like, I don't know how to find him. And they're like, why don't you just go to City Hall and ask? He's like, I don't know. It didn't occur to me. Like, because he kept saying my brain, is a little fried. But so there were a lot of skeptics that called in and were calling out exactly these holes in his story. I don't know. But when somebody asked how he could possibly use electromagnetism for time travel, he responded with, well, it's scientifically proven that you can use gravity to dilate time. Well, basically, I'm using electromagnetism, which is actually 10 to 30 times stronger. So I don't need a black hole to bend time. So that was his explanation.
Yeah.
And actually, a lot of really well-known physicists, which I forgot to look up how to properly say his name. So excuse me if I remember when I'm doing the podcast version, since there's no music, I'll try to replace it. But including, and it's Michio Kaku, I think is his name, or Mikio maybe. And you would recognize him if you looked up his picture, have said that if time travel is possible, it would be done with electricity and magnetism. And he even said that Marcum is kind of on the right track if it's possible. So he did have a lot of people saying that. And then I don't know if you guys are at all familiar with the Philadelphia Project.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It actually has the same basis. They were using magnetism and electricity in that experiment as
Interesting.
well. Yeah.
Okay.
It's another, I don't know if Paul, if you know anything about it, it's another like, it's, I don't want to say conspiracy theory, but it's kind of in that realm. It's not provable. It's an experiment that they did trying to.
Oh, that ship, the warship?
Yeah.
It's like cloaking. It was like a cloaking experiment.
It was a cloaking experiment, and supposedly it just disappeared for a sec.
Mm-hmm. And supposedly there were sailors that like, when they came to, were like half in the ship, like because the ship like displaced, but not completely evenly. Supposedly there were sailors that were like cut in half.
Yeah.
Or I don't remember. It's been years since I've read about it, but
yes.
But no real physical proof, I don't think. But it's
there's even like other stories like, oh yeah, and then it appeared in Virginia and came back. Like
people claim to have seen it in the gap time. Yeah.
Who knows? But it's the same basic principles as the Philadelphia Project.
Interesting.
There's another big problem with time travel in general. The problem with time travel is that Earth isn't just moving through time, it's moving through space. And the reason that this is a really, really big problem is that if you could, in fact, time travel, you would probably end up floating in space. Because the Earth is moving at such a high speed that it would effectively move away from where you're standing, such that when you reappeared in the same place relative to where you started, the Earth wouldn't be there anymore. And who knows where
or you'd be in the center of the Earth or something.
Well, it moves really fast. Like, I don't remember exactly, but like in the space of 10 minutes, it's something like 900 miles away.
Jeez.
Okay. So it's a very big problem. So somebody called in and asked him about that. And then it was funny because as I was listening, again, this is probably like hour 4 and I'm listening and they don't answer it. And I was like, what? And then finally somebody called in again. It was like, you didn't answer this really important question. Can you go back? And Marcum said that his machine actually stays in sync with the Earth's center of gravity. So he is moving through both time and space with Earth as he goes through. So he was prepared for the question. I don't know the physics of why that would be happening, but that is his answer.
I mean, he knows his machine better than anyone else. So.
Yes. And or we'll go back. Skeptics also question the absence of viral footage at this point, right? Why isn't this video everywhere? So again, he said that for the moment, he didn't have the names of his backers. He had no phone numbers. He didn't know how to get a hold of them. And it is kind of a big difference if he did lose 2 years of his life. If you think about like the evolution of the internet in those 2 years, a lot of people at that point would have been like, oh yeah, you can find this or that. It's still, internet was still a little iffy in 2000, but you could find a lot of information. But especially at this point, during this interview, this was, I believe, 2015. So everybody's, I forgot to mention that the third interview happened in about 2015. So everybody's up on Facebook, everybody's on YouTube. And I did look into this and I found videos. There's no way to prove whether that is true or not. There are videos up that claim to be sent to this YouTuber from one of Mike Marcum's sponsors. So I've seen some videos of pieces of the machine working, but I don't know if they're real. So there are possibly videos up there that's not of Mike, it's just the machine. Who knows?
Interesting. And it is, to me, it is sort of relevant that it's happening in the mid 90s. That it's really the last pre kind of internet, like you said, as we know it, kind of modern era for how we live our lives online and what's available and how we think about searching for something, looking for something. I mean, now so much of our lives is literally, I mean, we're doing this podcast right now, literally on, online for everyone to later then go back and check the tape, so to speak.
So I try to get the information right.
Yeah, like it really is the last era that he could have done this where there wouldn't be maybe any proof or vestige of something online. I feel like
because we would have been like live video.
Yeah, if it happened, if he was claiming that all of this happened even in 2010 or 2015, there probably would be some sort of online vestige to prove this false or true.
I know.
Yeah, I don't know what to think. I mean, part of, to be honest, a very large part of me wants to go full skeptic with this and say like, this could all just be the wild and, imagination of someone that wants some amount of fame.
Yeah. And it could be, somebody who has like a schizophrenia
or a mental health issue, or I don't know. I'm very skeptical, but then of course I know that all of the great geniuses, right, were called madmen in their time. And so like, is there a way, is there a little sliver of hope that this is real? Because I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? I have no idea what to think.
Yeah. I know it's tough. And Mike even started talking about rebuilding his machine. He said that he thinks that he could rebuild it because, again, he has about 90-95% of his memory. He remembers most of the design. It would take some tinkering again. And he also believed, he talked about the reasons about his backers. I forgot to go to that part. He thinks that perhaps his backers thought that he died in the vortex. So he was contemplating that maybe they erased videos. If you had a video of somebody who died, either to be like, this is too much, I'm gonna erase it, or to distance themselves.
I don't want to be involved in this guy's death.
Yeah, or simply put, just to erase any evidence. Yeah, really. I mean, they might have done like a full scrub to erase all the evidence if that was true. So
yeah, he talked about all of that stuff on the show. He also talked about he did say that he wanted to start a GoFundMe a few years ago, but I wasn't able to find a page. I saw screenshots of people that said, here's the GoFundMe. So I don't know if the page just expired or what happened with that. I was hoping to see updates.
Flipped through time.
I know. But I did actually find him on a few forums. Mike checked in a couple times. He's moved to Hawaii and he spent most of his career in some kind of technology business. And of course, there are still rumors that he's contemplating creating the new version of the machine if time and money will allow. It would be millions of dollars. So, it's be a long shot, but he would be open to it. And you know what?
Like, hit up Elon.
Yeah. I mean, seriously.
I mean, that's actually a good point. He probably would maybe go for something like that.
I know.
Yeah.
Why not? You have tons of money. What's there to lose? Put your name on it, and then if it doesn't happen, it's not that big of a deal for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of hope he does it, because I think the world needs people who aren't
Document
afraid
it.
to
Send it
think
out.
outside the box, right? Like, we need these people who are just the madmen. Oh, I forgot to mention that Art Bell actually gave him that name, Madman. Marcum. He always says it's affectionate. It's not making fun of him. But yeah, so we need more of those people. We need them to think outside the box, to explore and create despite the pressures of the world saying, no, you can't. And how else can we leap forward and advance our knowledge, right? We need people like Mike Marcum to push us and to question everything that we think we know. At the worst, we further test and then solidify our current theories. And at best, we might begin a whole new age of science. We literally cannot lose here. Unless maybe he makes the doomsday device. But otherwise, we can't lose. So wherever you are, Mike Marcum, if these words just somehow find you, know that the world awaits your next leap into the unknown, into a realm where daring minds question the impossible, and your journey stands as a beacon, urging us all to push boundaries of humanity's understanding. And I hope that you continue to forge ahead in the pursuit of knowledge. And it's an odyssey without bounds. Just keep going. So I'll ask you all, my friends, on the screen and in our chat and our listeners of podcasts, I want to know what you think. So is Mike Marcum indeed Madman Marcum? Did he enter some kind of a fugue state and hallucinate parts of his life, finally coming out of it years later with false memories? Or is he humanity's very first time traveler and a true, genuine genius of his time? Let me know. I want to hear about all of your thoughts. I'm just fascinated by this story. And I don't know. I still always kind of hope that it happened, because the implications of it would just be astonishing. And
that's what I was going to say is a lot of it just sounds like, okay.
I know.
But, sometimes things happen in the world and in life that are stranger than fiction.
Yes.
You just can't write. And
I mean, think about all of the, all of history. Every time that somebody has come up with these scientific advancements, they were like, oh, no. They were like Copernicus, was like, hey, I discovered this incredible thing. And the church was like, no, go be locked in a tower for a while. No. And they turn out to be, real things. And so who knows?
Yeah. I mean, who knows if 100 years from now or 500 years from now, this is, time travel is possible.
Yeah.
And I mean, someone living in the year 1650, if you had told them that we would walk on the moon, they would not have believed you. They would have thought you were a sorcerer. They probably would have burned you at the stake.
Yes.
So
or that you could hold all of human knowledge in your hand and find the answer to just about anything.
100%. So I think that's like the window that if you're willing to make some leaps, that there's definitely a sliver of believability here. And
I do kind of hope.
I'd never heard anything about this ever. So it's so intriguing.
Yeah.
Love it.
And I like to think about like all the advancements we could make too as humans, right? All the questions that we could answer that have plagued us just for centuries. And I feel like we could become the greatest examples of our species if we had this kind of knowledge. But we might never know the answers. I suppose only time will tell. And until then, this will remain yet another magical mystery.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Amanda Benjamin.
Yay.
Putting another fascinating story together so well, and it is that thing where they say, like, if we ever invented time travel in the future, we'd already know about it.
I have heard that argument as well.
So
yeah.
one thing that he did talk about, see, there's always so many things. He talked about how traveling backwards in time is questionable at this point in time because you have to leave the machine active. And then it's like, so it's one of those, the amount of power that you would have to leave it, power it takes and leaving it on is astronomical for us. So at this point, like backward time travel isn't necessarily true. So you could go forward, but like nobody could come back and tell us, hey, guess what we did?
Didn't Stephen Hawking throw himself a birthday party in the future to try to prove whether time travel had been invented in the future yet? And I can't remember the details, but look this up. This is a real thing. I believe he did, and nobody showed up. So that's, I think this is not a joke. I think this is 100% real. Yeah. So, because he had done all these calculations of, like, they could only be invented in the future. And so if I don't know, I would have to look it up and I'll follow up. But
the reason that
I think there was a birthday party.
The reason that I'm like, this is something else. Like it makes me laugh. I just imagine the Futurama episode of this. And like, I don't know if you guys watch Futurama at all, but
I mean, I know of it, but I've never really watched it.
It's like the perfect Futurama like bit of like Stephen Hawking and his like birthday hat waiting.
No, yeah, I think it was on The Simpsons. I may be making all of this up, but I think they did parody it on something.
Oh man,
you guys may have to cut this out if I find this may all just be from my like some weird crevice of my brain, and it's an alternate or like a time slit or a split in time, almost like the Mandela effect. And maybe I remember this and others don't.
I love the Mandela effect. I have way too many. I swear to God, it is the Berenstain Bears, and I will die on that hill.
I will die on that hill too. That's the one for me that
that's the scariest one of all. I'm like,
that's the scariest one for me.
We read those as kids in the library, and it was the Berenstain Bears.
Yeah, it was. So it's,
Paul, do you think it's Berenstain or Berenstain, Paul?
Which one do you remember it as? Did you read the Berenstain Bear books?
Yeah.
Where is it, Berenstain or Berenstain?
It's Steen.
Thank you. So
it is not. They are the Berenstains. They are the Berenstain.
Yeah. So go look at the books if you have any. It says Berenstain on it.
It's scary.
Scary.
I don't understand.
Probably just repeating whatever my parents told me it was.
Well, I think that's the argument, right? Is that we all were just repeating what we heard, and everybody was just saying Berenstain since like Steen is such a common name component. Instead of Stain, you don't see Stain in a name as much. So that's the argument. Yeah.
There's something about the Publishers Clearinghouse.
That Ed McMahon isn't part of the Publishers Clearinghouse.
Yeah. You remember
Wait, was he not?
No.
Don't you remember Ed McMahon presenting checks to people on their doorstep?
Yes.
He did. He didn't.
I know. It's weird. I forget. He did do something similar, but it was not. Ed McMahon was not Publishers Clearinghouse.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
That one blows my mind. Okay.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this whole we'll give. I know we'll kind of stray from the timeline that we put together. Amanda a little bit of a break and set the stage for our guest today to share her time slip stories with us. With when you heard about the theme, what came to your mind?
Well, I have, you guys know this from messaging with me, and my listeners know this, I think. I have been obsessed with the paranormal since I was a kid. I have only recently started looking into time slips, though, because for me, time travel sometimes falls a little too much into the sci-fi realm for my tastes. I think in the paranormal world, you'll often find people are either sci-fi, aliens, time travel, or, like 17th century ghosts. And I'm more the 17th century ghost.
But I am all of the
person.
above, just so you know.
See,
I love
that's
them
amazing.
all. Like, give me all of the content.
And I think you're very unique, like in a great way, because I do find that most people tend to fall into one of the categories. But time slip for me as a concept is one that will bring me a little bit into the corner of the time travel universe, because I'm a historian. As a historian, it's the ultimate fantasy, right? Like the idea that we could peek back into little slivers of time, into moments of history with no consequences, and then come back to talk about it. That's sort of the historian's, nerdiest dream. And I find that the definition, like I mentioned earlier, of time slips it just fascinates me, right? The idea that time travel could be accidental. So for me, that sort of pulls it more into the world of the paranormal and less in the world of sci-fi. So the main time slip that I have known about is the Moberly Jourdain incident. Have you guys ever heard of this one? The Palace of Versailles. Have you heard this one?
No.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
Saw, Marie Antoinette on the
Yes. Yes. So to me, that was sort of my entree into time slips. And I've read a lot about that one. But one thing that I had sort of noticed about time slips, any stories I heard about before I researched mine for today, is that, yes, they seem accidental, right? And that they are typically really like 30 seconds to maybe a few minutes long. And that's the interesting part about it, is that you come back. And I was thinking about it in terms of Amanda's story, like this question with his machine was, will we come back? But with the time slip, people tend to come back. Although, and I'm going to blow your mind, I did on one website, because I went into so many rabbit holes. Okay. And I promise I'm about to introduce mine. Someone did suggest that when people go missing, what if it's a time slip? So like just when people just, missing case files. So I'll leave everybody with that. I could barely sleep last night after I read that, but yes. So I've been interested in them, and there's one place in England, in Liverpool, where a cluster of time slips have happened, and people have reported them. And my family and I were in Liverpool last summer, and I had forgotten that I'd heard these stories. I listened to so many paranormal podcasts, and I knew about this street in Liverpool. It's called Bold Street. We go to lunch at this amazing place called Almost Famous in Liverpool. So if you're ever in Liverpool, I recommend. It's like the best burger I've ever had in my life. But we're on Parr Street, and we walk right by Bold Street. And so I see this, this line of such kind of edifices that I've seen in all these pictures from the Bold Street time slip stories. And I couldn't believe that I was just right there where, people claim to have walked back into the 1950s, walked back into the 1800s. So it feels like a little bit of a, not really personal, but I wanted to pick this topic because I've been right there. And I definitely had a moment in my brain of, like, should we find the bookstore where one of these stories happened? Should we try?
Totally
should we tempt
that.
fate? We did not, and nothing happened. But I do want to tell you today about the time slips of Bold Street in Liverpool, in England. So the thing that's really amazing is Amanda and I didn't talk at all about how our stories connected, but they sort of do in theme and concept. Because people believe Bold Street is a place for time slips because it is at the top of a series of circles that form the tube, the subway underground. And so if you look at a map of the Liverpool tube, it does seem to be in these concentric circles. And Bold Street is roughly at the center of these circles. Now, the counter to that, I did read one source that claimed that the mapping is done just for ease of use for writers. And that if you actually look at how it's constructed, it's not as perfectly circular. But a lot of people believe that if it really is circles like this, that it's like a force that's accidentally creating this energy. And what's interesting is that It was electrified in the 1920s, and none of the time slips really go back before that. There's like one or two that are in the in the 1800s, but for the most part, most of these time slips are post when the tube was electrified. So that's sort of maybe there's a
because we
little
talk
bit
about
of
electricity and magnetism.
Mhm.
I'm sure that the tubes use magnets as well.
Yeah. So that's what made me, when you were telling your story, I was just sort of amazed that there is this connective tissue we have between these two, because if you add electricity to circles and magnets, maybe so.
Maybe.
So I'm going to start and end with a story about a man and a woman named Frank and Carol. And we're going to come back to Frank and Carol at the end for some sort of follow-up information that blew my mind. So one of the most famous time slip stories is from a man named Frank, who is an off-duty police officer. And this is in the year 2000. No, this one's in 1996. So he and his wife, Carol's his wife, are just out shopping on Bold Street, and they're headed towards a Waterstones, which is a bookstore. And they reach a corner, they run into a friend of theirs. And so Frank is, sort of ushers his wife on, like, you go on, I want to talk to our friend for a few minutes. So she leaves and they're now separate. He talks to his friend, then walks the rest of the way up Bold Street. And all of a sudden, he is not in the 1990s. He is in the 1950s. His brain doesn't register that, of course, at first, because he's like, what the hell is going on? He sees cars that look like old vintage 1950s cars. He sees a van go by and it has the word Cardin's on it, which is not a company he recognizes. And it's like an old timey van. He sees women walking around in big full skirts, vintage clothes. Men are wearing hats.
So he's like thinking that he came across like some kind of convention.
Yeah,
right?
He's thinking like, is there a fair going on?
Right.
Is there some sort of event going on?
And
classic
just
car.
Really quick. I just want to see if we can change a little bit. I'm getting like a lot of it's not quite feedback. Do you hear it, Paul? It's like a metallic sound. I'm hearing it on my end, which means it might be on Zoom. I don't know if you can like lower your mic like this much to see if
yeah, absolutely.
I just want to see if that goes away.
Yeah.
Let's see. Not a ton, because I don't want your volume to go away. I can raise you from here though if I need to.
Okay. Think hopefully that's a little, is that any better?
Can you speak loudly with enthusiasm?
I do. I'm so
sorry.
I
said can you, so that way we can hear your.
All right. Oh gosh, now I'm having a mic malfunction.
Oh no, I know these mic stands are.
I know they're terrible, but that may solve our problem because now it's further away from me.
Like I said, it's not like your voice was loud. There's just like this metallic.
Is that better?
So far. Let's try it.
So he's bewildered, right? He's, standing in the middle of the street, doesn't know what to do. And he looks over at where he's supposed to be going, to this Waterstones bookstore. And it doesn't say Waterstones. It says Cripps. And it's a clothing store. Cripps is Cripps. And there's a woman standing at the door, and she's wearing modern clothing. She is wearing 1990s clothing. And he looks at her and they make eye contact and kind of look at each other like, what is going on? And he walks up because he's thinking, I have to at least communicate with the other person that looks like they're from my time period. So he walks up to her. And as he and she look at each other and walk in the door, turns back to a bookstore.
What?
And he turns to her and he sees his wife. His wife, Carol's browsing books. He waves. He's stunned. He turns to the woman. Her name is Julie. And which we know what her name is because of an update that I'll share. But he turns to Julie and he says, did you see that too? And she says to him, I thought it was like a new vintage clothing store and I was going to come in and shop. But they share this moment and they both have seen the same time slip. So that is the most iconic and most well-known Bold Street time slip story.
Wow.
Now, I will give credit to a Reddit thread that's done by a user called This Is Hugh, and he compiled all of the Bold Street time slip stories. And so I do want to give credit where credit is due. I want to share a couple more, though, before we go back to Frank and Carol and Julie. So another one that is very well known is about a man named Sean. And in 2006, he was like a petty thief. He was stealing from a store on Bold Street. And he runs out of the store, goes down to a corner. He's trying to lose the security guard behind him. And he runs and he's out of breath. And he's thinking, I feel lightheaded. I feel like I might throw up. I think I need to stop and turn myself in because there's no way I'm going to be able to run anymore. And he looks around and he's sure that the security guard would have caught up to him by now, but nobody, nothing. And he starts to notice this kind of eerie silence. And then all of a sudden he is, with sort of a surge, he is in this street, and again, another time period. So he notices old-fashioned clothing, old-fashioned cars. He's very disoriented. He looks down, he has his cell phone with him. And this also reminded me of your story. His cell phone does not work.
Right.
Of course. And he goes to a newsstand and he looks at a newspaper, 1961. And he then starts walking again in just utter disbelief and disorientation. And that's the thing I think about with these stories is like, can you imagine what it must feel like to be in that moment? I mean, I suffer from horrible anxiety just from like normal things in life. And could you imagine the level of anxiety if nothing around you felt normal or familiar? You felt like you'd lost your footing on reality. These people probably think they're going crazy in these moments, right? And so he starts walking again and he looks down at his phone again, just out of hope, just out of, sort of desperation, and it starts to light up. And he looks up and he's back on the Bold Street that he knows again. And the craziest thing about this story is that the security guard was interviewed on a TV show, because this story was shared on a paranormal TV show in the UK. And the security guard says he just disappeared.
Oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So that there, the internet's a wild and wacky place. And I tried to go back to some of the original sources on these, and it's nearly impossible. They've been passed around different podcasts, different TV shows, Reddit threads. So, take all of this with a grain of salt. But several of these stories have been supposedly researched and told by some of the UK's paranormal experts. So they seem to be the ones that are credited as potentially the most true. Are you ready for one that takes us into the future?
Ooh, yes.
What's fascinating is that these are all happening on the same street.
Yeah.
That is why I really wanted to cover this and look into it more, because it's about location. It seems to be a just accidental time slips, just completely about location on Bold Street. So, the one in the future just creeps me out. Oh. I was telling it to my husband in front of our daughter, and he sort of looked at me. Don't talk about this. Okay. So if she's watching, he's been warned. Basically this mother and daughter who are really into tattoos are walking down in this area, and I think this is 2013, I believe, when this is happening. And they're shopping, they're spending the day out with one another. And they come across what they think is a new tattoo parlor, and it's called Instant Tattoo. And they walk in, and it's very futuristic looking, very modern looking, and they're sort of in awe. And they talk to the man, and he says, yeah, it's Instant Tattoo. We can put you, we put your arm or your leg or whatever you want in this machine, basically. And it's, it's painless. It's laser. It's, it's a permanent tattoo, but it's completely painless. And I think he's sort of, enamored of how surprised they are that this process exists. So they get tattoos. The mom gets a tattoo. And a couple of days later, she is looking at her bank statement, and it's on the bank statement. It says instant tattoo. So that's the part of this story that I'm like, I don't know if I believe this. So then a few days later, she's talking to a friend about it, telling them about this, like, this is amazing new place to get a tattoo. And the friend is, you're making this up. That's not possible. That's not. And so she takes her friend to this place and it's gone. Of course, it doesn't exist. And she claims that over the course of a few days, the tattoo faded away on her skin. So that, and I will be transparent. That's the one I could find the least amount of documentation online.
Yeah.
Although there is what is his name? There's an expert in the UK on paranormal. His name is Tom Sleeman, Slemen. And he has reported on this story. So apparently he thinks it's worth some amount of credibility. The one more that I want to share. Is there time for one more?
Oh yeah. We have all the time in the world.
And now I'm like, it's like almost 4:30 here. So I'm like, wow, when this is over, I'm going to slide into happy hour. This is fun.
Perfect. If you want, you can slide into happy hour now.
Yeah, we'll take it.
If my husband is listening, deliver a beverage. Just kidding. I think he's still working. So the last one is about a woman named Imogen and a mother care store. So mother care store in the UK is a baby and mom store. You know, you go for diapers, infant clothing, that sort of thing. They call them mother care stores. So she is getting gifts for her sister's new baby and just shopping around, looking at booties and onesies and teddy bears. And she notices that the prices are really low. And she's thinking, well, it's a new store. I didn't notice it here before. Must have just opened. So maybe they're putting things on sale. These are introductory prices. So she gets a bundle of things, takes it to the register, and she gets out her credit card. And the women behind the counter look at her like she's a little bit, not crazy, but just kind of raise an eyebrow. And they go get their manager. And the manager comes out and says, oh, we don't take cards here. We only take cash, money. So she leaves and she can't get the things. Obviously, she doesn't have any cash on her. And a couple of days later, she's talking to her mom, who grew up in Liverpool, and she's telling her about the experience. And her mom says, that mother care store has not been on that corner since you were a baby. And yeah. And she says, it's a bank now. That's where I do my banking. And her daughter, who had been in the store, said, no, I will take you there right now. And they walk there. And sure enough, it's a bank. So that is also a very well documented one for Bold Street.
Wow.
Now, there are so many, and I would encourage people to go to this Reddit thread. If you just search Bold Street time slip, this is Hugh, he's the user, you'll find it. There's 30 of them.
Ooh.
And I think that it's similar to the Art Bell sort of call-in situation. Like over the years, a lot of the paranormal podcasts that exist have had people call in or leave messages and share even more stories about Bold Street. So there seems to be this energy around it, which arguably is either 100% real or just 100% an example of bandwagon, and people will, almost like mass,
I would
not
be
hysteria.
Interested to know if any of those people knew about the Bold Street time slips before that happened.
Yeah, like if the power of suggestion may make you think that you're experiencing something. But it does seem to be a very disproportionate number of occurrences for one location. And, we've been in that area. We walked right by. It's near Liverpool 1, which is their huge outdoor shopping mall restaurant area. It's a very unassuming street. It's just kind of off to the side, a few restaurants, a few stores. It's a very unassuming place. It's very random that so many are being reported in this one spot. Now, are you ready for your mind to be blown?
Yes. Okay. I'm so excited.
So ready.
This is I'm a curious skeptic. This one brings me into the realm of 100%.
Okay.
So has anyone listened to the podcast Uncanny with Danny Robbins?
No.
Okay. I highly recommend it if you are obviously, into all of this long term. You should definitely listen to this podcast. He is in England, he's an amazing accent, but he researches ghost stories and tries to get to the bottom of them. Like he interviews people, he does historical research, and he crafts these really elegant, very well put together episodes where he consults with paranormal experts. He sort of shows both sides of the story. He's very much a skeptic, but he's had a few cases where he's been freaked out, really. And he'll even talk about it. There's a few times that he's just not able to sleep at night when he's studying a particular case. So one of the cases was completely unrelated to Bold Street. But in the course of researching an episode, and I'm going to pull this up and read it directly. In the course of researching one of his episodes a couple of years ago, he and his panel of experts mentioned the Bold Street time slips, and they mention the story of Frank and Carol. And one of the listeners of the podcast then calls in or writes into Danny Robbins, the host, and here's what happened. I'm just going to read it because it's crazy. Okay. So Danny Robbins says, this is the exact transcript, like Kieran, and Kieran is one of his panel of experts, I'd wondered if this story, the Bold Street time slip, was a romantic myth. But knowing it might help our investigation on this other thing they were working on, I wanted to make sure. So he told his listeners, basically, I would love to hear from any of you who think they might know who Frank from Frank and Carol is, if that rings a bell. Or indeed, the girl that was with him also in 1990s clothing. Within minutes, my social media was on fire. And whilst I couldn't find Frank, remarkably, a woman named Julie came forward who believes that she was the girl in 1990s clothing that Frank saw in the bookshop that day. She has never spoken publicly about this before, but she has come to Bold Street to meet me. So this is a live recording. Julie, hello, you are real. And she says, hi, I am real. Danny Robbins, I couldn't believe it when you emailed me. I really thought that this was all just an urban legend. In 1996, Julie was in her 20s and had never experienced anything she thought was paranormal. And then this is Julie talking. So I stood here and I looked into the window, and she's talking about Bold Street. And the display was old-fashioned, like 1940s, 1950s, vintage shoes, handbags. They looked really good quality. And I thought, oh, wow, I didn't know whether it was vintage or if they were just putting on an old 1940s vibe. So I turned and I saw people, about 12 people, but they were in 1940s and 1950s clothes. And Danny Robbins says, when you say that, what do you mean? And Julie says, the men stuck in my mind more. It's that they had Macs and hats on. And I distinctively remember a man with a big paper under his arm. Danny Robbins, so did you go into the shop? And Julie says, yes, I went into the shop. I opened the door. And as I went in, initially everything was old fashioned. It was dark inside. And then as I turned around, the shop became lighter again. Next to me, there was just book displays, and I see a sign for Dylan's. As I'm coming out of the door, and that is the discrepancy, I will say, like the stories have been told as it being Waterstones, but she says the bookstore is Dylan's. I wonder if that's just like over time, people changed up the name of the bookstore, so I don't know that really matters. So this is Julie continuing. As I'm coming out of the door, a man in 90s clothes, now this is the first person I'd seen in 90s clothes, grabbed my arm and he said, did you see that? And I said, yes. And Danny Robbins says, and that man was Frank. And she says, yes. And Danny Robbins says, both of you experienced this moment at the same time. And she says, yeah. All I could think was, get out of here as quick as you can. And Danny Robbins says, how scared were you in that moment? And Julie replies, I was really scared because part of me thought, what if I don't come back? What if I go out this door and those people are still real and it's still old and I'm back in town? And Danny Robbins says, the one thing we are always told is that time travel is impossible. Am I talking to someone who has traveled in time? And Julie replies, I really don't know. I just know that I had this experience.
Interesting.
Wow.
What? Like and again, this ties to Amanda's story because the power we have now of the internet.
Right.
To find people and to research and to try to back up stories that have become almost folklore, almost mythic, paranormal tales. Now, could this woman be lying? 100%.
Right. That's kind of wondering. I was like, was there any information that he didn't give out on the air that she gave?
I don't think
That's
so.
the
Now
only
I'd
thing
have
that
to
I'm
go
like-
back. I'd have to go back and listen to the full episode because I was remembering this episode and then
Right.
just looked up the transcript of this part. But I don't think so. I know that Danny Robbins is 100% about research and authenticity. Right. And so I think if he had a lot of doubts, he would have expressed that because he has before about other witnesses that have come forward. He seemed to really trust her.
Okay.
And she could prove that she was this age and in this location, back in the day. Yeah. So I don't know. I just think it's so amazing that with the internet now, we could potentially have these moments where stories kind of line up and we can, but I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm genuinely curious of what you guys think about the sort of centrifugal force of this one location. I don't know. There's so many stories talk about a rabbit hole. Like I said, I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of insane.
I like it in that it's really interesting. One, of course, they're all in the same location. I mean, I guess technically you could probably build up, but that's a lot. Like 30.
Yeah, or more. I mean, I came across at least 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot. And what I think is interesting is the corroborating. I was wondering, remember the mom and the daughter at the tattoo shop? Did like the daughter corroborate?
Well, see, that's the one that made me feel iffy about that story is one, there weren't names attached to it. Okay. And two, I can never find it repeated where we got any sense of the daughter's perspective.
Yeah,
so that seems like a big hole in that one. Yeah.
That was when I was like, I feel like you should be able to say, yeah, and this is my daughter and she had the same experience. And
or like we took because that one was in 2013. I mean, you would think like she'd take a picture of that tattoo. Again, like the lack of physical evidence.
Especially in 2013,
is always
you're like,
alarming.
Put it on Facebook.
Yeah, I know, right? Or you'd take a picture of your bank statement, but then I guess the argument could be made that all of that might disappear if if a time slip is kind of a glitch in the matrix, if it's a glitch in our consciousness or our collective consciousness or whatever it may be, or just a glitch in the world around us, that when that glitch fixes itself, maybe any evidence of it also erases itself. And I know, I mean, that's also a complete other conversation to have about defining a time slip and how it would maybe affect just the pattern of our universe. I don't know. Yeah. Like, does it have a ripple effect in some way?
Mm-hmm. I've always been so fascinated with like just the idea that energy in certain areas is different just based on like the layout, or in haunted places it's the limestone nearby, or it's just the feng shui of the neighborhood basically. So
or like stone tape theory, where it's this idea that limestone I think is often cited with this idea that a process or a pattern or a voice might actually be recorded onto the physical things around us, a rock, a stream, limestone, wood, whatever it may be, that then that's playing back or that the energy of objects might be interacting with us. Yeah, it's astounding to think about.
I hadn't heard of that, but that is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic stories.
Very interesting. And I love when when they're like corroborating, like two people. I wish that we had Frank. So Frank could say like, yes,
I know. I wish that Frank would have come forward. You'd think maybe if he's still alive, he might. But again, a lot of these, including the Frank and Carol and then the mother care story, these are pretty documented in the sense that when they happened, like the Frank and Carol story was on, it was a show in the UK called Billy Butler Show, I believe, if I'm remembering that right. So there've been they've been featured even before the, world of podcasts. They were
Right.
featured on TV shows and a lot. So, I mean, it seems like there's an air of some level of trust and people wanting to hear these stories because they do believe these people on some level. But I don't know. I mean,
Right.
a time slip could also just be a glitch in your brain. I mean, there's the
true.
argument to be made that a time slip could just be someone's brain having a hiccup, essentially.
Or picking up energy in the air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We talked to one of our guests who was I forget what her title was, but she talked about the frequencies, like just changing the frequency in your brain and like how that can take you anywhere, really.
Right.
Well, it's like astral projection. I mean, some people swear to, by their abilities to astral project. And that's based off of, like energy and forces and sort of mind control. And I mean, I'm in, I'm a historian and I'm a research fact. I mean, whatever way you want to put it.
Yeah, I know.
But I'm in on some of this stuff because I think that a scientist would tell you, an expert would tell you on the human brain, especially, we don't know everything. There's so much that we don't know. There's a huge percentage that we don't know. And the functionality of it and how it operates with the universe around us. There's so much knowledge that we haven't even tapped into.
Right.
And I'm sort of like, who knows what could be real or who knows what's possible if we unlocked other parts of our brains. I mean, I'm all in on, it's kind of like with Amanda's story. I'm all in on being open to the idea that there's more we don't know and that there's more we could find out and there's more we could do.
That's why I always say that especially when we do these shows, but I talk about it all the time. I'm like, you just need to be open. You don't have to say, yes, it's true.
No,
right.
Of course
I mean,
not.
like, because, and I am somebody who's like, I always say, like, I have the X-Files feeling like that. I want to believe. Right. Like, and, so I do want to believe because I want to think that there's more that we don't know. There's stuff we don't understand. Right. Like maybe there are ghosts and people do live on and maybe, all this stuff. And like, I want to believe it. And I won't say, yes, it's true until you show me that, that thing. That
I
says,
want
yes,
proof. I mean, I think there's
I still want,
point.
I still will listen. Like a lot of people are like, until you can prove to me it is true, it is not. And I'm like, that is too hard of a stance because like I said, in history,
too hard of a line.
Yeah. In all of history, there'd be so many times that you would have been like, nope, the world is flat. And
I know, but it's true. It's true that there was, I mean, a huge section of human history where a good many people did believe the earth was just like, I mean, our own belief systems and how our brain works is in direct relation to what we're told, what we're taught, the environment that we grow up in.
But
what we're told is crazy or not crazy.
But if we have that feeling of, well, nope, that's not true. Like, then nobody's going to stand up and say, let me explore that. I mean, and we would never make the advancements if nobody thinks like, maybe it's not.
Nobody's willing.
We need
and again, like I
that.
said earlier, I feel like many geniuses in history were people that were called madmen of their time or mad women of their time, particularly women. But I won't go down that. That's a whole podcast. But and not to derail too much, I know, but when it comes to, I've listened to a lot of your episodes, and I know you guys have talked about this, but in terms of ghosts, right? That there are so many people who are scared to talk about it or in denial that anything could be true. But then when you really start talking to people in a comfortable environment, if someone feels like they are comfortable admitting things to you, so many of us have stories. I mean, there are more people than not have stories that involve something paranormal. It's just, especially in the US, we're programmed to be very ashamed to talk about it. It's more common to talk about these things somewhere like the UK, where they're living with this longer, deeper, darker history that they're talking about a lot. And I think it's more common to hear people talk about hauntings. And if you ever want me to come on your podcast and tell the full story, I will. But my husband and I, we 100% had a haunting in a home we lived in. And we never, ever expected that to happen. We are very skeptical people. We had always loved to hear ghost stories, but kind of always thought like it wouldn't happen to us because it's probably not real, right? But we lived it, and so I don't know. I think
We
that
definitely need to have you on it.
Yes, 100%. That's in season 2.
I want to know now.
We'll put. We're gonna put a date on the book.
Again, I won't derail, but if you ever do want me to, and to talk about some of these things like stone tape theory, because in our personal situation, I think that might have been what was going on, and I've done a little bit of research in it, but yeah, I think it just ties into what you were saying though. It's that like you just never know.
Yeah.
What could be, and to be closed-minded makes no sense in a world where we are constantly discovering new things in the ocean. We're constantly discovering new ways our brain works. It's like to live in the world that we live in and to be closed-minded to me makes no sense.
Yeah.
but I understand it's fear, it provokes fear in a lot of people. And I do understand that. So I think some people run from things that aren't comfortable.
Yeah.
And I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I mean, everybody in the live chat is like, have her on again, have her
yes.
on again.
Like I said, we'll put a date on the books for our next recording.
No, I would.
session.
Oh my gosh, I would love to. My Titanic listeners do not know this story. I'll tell you that. So it'll
be an exclusive.
This is a reveal on. This is a reveal on your pod. But no, I would love to. But anyway, I derailed. But I will definitely come back and talk about that at some point.
Great.
Well, I know it is late over there, so I'll pull the curtain back for just a second and we can chat real quick. Do you guys want to take like a little break, a little potty cocktail break, come back and do the last 2 songs of my stories, or LA, we can let you go? And,
if you would.
No, I'm good.
Okay,
If my husband is still watching, he's gonna laugh. I'm good. You guys, I have a 7 and a 9-year-old, and I am down in the basement part of our house, uninterrupted and not monitoring children. So please, feel free to. And if my husband is still watching and he's done with work, if you would like to do a cocktail delivery or a beer delivery, I'm game. If you don't hear this, don't feel bad afterwards. But if you do hear it, go for it. But yeah, I'm good. If people do need like a restroom break or anything, I'm happy to but I'm good right now. So
I'm okay. If you need to go potty during my song, that's fine.
Yeah. I'm gonna take 5 if that's cool.
Oh yeah, please do. Yeah.
We'll come right back. And
do you want me to start my song, like I said, while you go, or do you want me to wait till you come back?
Oh, you want? Okay,
that's what I said. You can like go do whatever you got to do while I do my song. That's fine.
Yeah. Is my air conditioner too loud for me to introduce your song?
That's
is
okay.
Is it okay?
Just try it. If there's no background music, if we really need it, then we can always re-record that later.
Let's do that then.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, LA, for those amazing stories about Bolt Street in Liverpool. If I ever make it out to Liverpool, I'm definitely going to go try and have my own slip.
Well, and go eat at the place. I will remind you if you need the recommendation. It truly is one of my favorite meals I've ever had. So you can have a good meal and then try to have a time slip.
That sounds like a perfect afternoon.
And we always talk about like all the places we want to like someday we'll take Magical Mystery Hour on the road. And so now we have another.
Oh, that would be a good spot.
Because we keep saying like we want to go to the Mothman Festival. So now we can go to Liverpool. Let me think. Where else did we say we want to go?
LA
Nashville?
says there's a Bigfoot festival out by her too.
There's a Bigfoot festival that's within an hour of me. So you can totally come and stay with me if you go. And we could do like a field trip. But yeah, there's a lot. North Carolina, we're right near like, Tennessee, West Virginia, Ohio.
See, we got to go to Tennessee too.
We've got a lot of spooky festivals.
And now apparently Ohio, because it's super haunted.
Super sus.
Super sus, Ohio.
Super sus.
The state of Ohio is so sus. Well, Amanda, based on the time slip theme, what song jumped into your mind or slipped into your mind?
You know what? I actually had a few songs and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then when I was finishing up my story yesterday and I was watching all these videos, right, on all the science stuff, the plasma tornadoes, everything, I was getting very sciencey. And I still didn't know. I kept being like, I'll probably just do this one. It's like 3 chords. It'll be fine. And then I was on my way home yesterday and this song came on the radio and I was like, Yes. Yes. And that song is actually John Mayer's Gravity, because so much of time has to do with gravity and forces and everything. And I was like, how perfect is that?
There
So
you
I
go.
went with Gravity.
Serendipitous that it came on the radio to inspire you.
Yes.
And playing live on the show, ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Amanda Benjamin and her cover of John Mayer's Gravity.
And I'm just going to make sure my guitar, you can still hear it, hopefully. Let's see. I don't know, because, audience, I'm going to mute my mic. I know you guys are on a little delay. So let me know if you can hear my guitar, first of all. I don't know what's happening. Hang on one sec. Oh, we might have to take a little second. I don't know. No, it's still... You hear this, like, feedback I'm getting. It sounds fuzzy, right? Like, yeah, Dari said, like, it's not fully plugged in. It's better, but it's, I wonder if the battery might be dying. Let me, I might have to call David and tell him to get me a battery. No, it's still not good. Hold on, let me literally call David. He's in the next room, but I don't want to shout with you guys. Here. He's going to be like, why are you calling me during your show? Yes. All right. Thank you. I know. That's what the audience can't hear what you're saying right now. But here, let me put you on speakerphone. All right. David, you're here on speakerphone.
Hello, audience. I am currently retrieving a 9-volt battery for Amanda's guitar.
Oh, no. I just remembered. Now we have to take off the strap. It's a whole issue.
Oh, because you're playing that guitar.
Yeah. So
couldn't be playing the new one.
Well, I mean, you could bring me I can try it on my electric if you want to bring that up.
No, I've already got the battery here.
Have you been able to? Oh, here, right here. Have you been able to listen to any of this, David?
Nope.
No.
It's a work day.
It's a work day. All right. Dari says hi.
Hi, Dari.
Isn't
I
it?
trust all of this will be staying in the podcast version.
No. Can you imagine how boring this would be? It's boring enough on a live stream, let alone a podcast. Oh my God. Maybe you should bring up my electric. All right. Great. David's got it. He's got it handled. So yeah, I don't know, guys. How's it going in YouTube lands? Oh no. Oh good. I thought I lost my pick.
I'm popping back in just to chat while you.
Hello.
Hello.
Paul's gone. I was like, oh, maybe she's in the bathroom too. I don't know.
No, I should have. I just have been sitting here. I'm in kind of like I should just go grab a beer, but
You should.
know what? I'm feeling lazy. I'm like, I'm just comfortable.
You're like, if
right
it's not
now.
delivery, I'm not getting it.
I know. I know I said I would forgive it, but he may get a talking to. 'Cause he's supposed to
You're
be
like,
watching.
I know it sounded like I was joking, but I was being sincere. Hi, Paul.
What did I miss?
You missed my guitar. Like all of a sudden, like it was fine, and then it's like I did my first chord. I was like, "Can you guys still hear it?" And it was all, and I was like, "Oh no!" So David's currently replacing the battery for me, so you guys don't have to see me struggle.
Gotcha.
And hoping that fixes the situation. Where's the plug? Wait, in case I
missed
need
the
to
song.
get I know you just missed me like fumbling around and being like, "What's happening?" Okay, let's see if this sounds better. Okay, here we go. Sound clear?
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Thank you. All right, so now for reals, let me just look at this one chord. Yeah. Okay. For reals this time, I'm gonna do John Mayer.
Oh my gosh, guys, hold on really quickly.
Yeah, go for it.
I think I hear something. This worked.
What'd you do?
Delivery.
Yes.
Yay!
It worked. Oh my goodness. Look at this business. Lorelai, do you want to say hi?
Hi.
Thank you, my love.
Of course.
Well, happy hour. Cheers.
Cheers.
Aw,
This looks oh, Manhattan.
Nice.
Good husband. Good
I know.
husband.
I know. Good job, John. So sorry. I'm so sorry.
No.
We just talked it up so much and I heard it
Yes.
about to happen.
No,
so I
you
was like, we should get it on
I
camera.
love it. And
All right.
I laughed
music
because
time.
Dari just said that my guitar was like, I'm not performing without Paul listening or watching. I guess so, because it did. Like, it was fixed right about the time you got back.
And we'll watch and enjoy our cocktails while Amanda
Yes.
performs Gravity.
Thanks. Oh, how funny. I just tried to turn my camera off. Don't do that. All right, here we go. Gravity. Gravity is working against me. And gravity wants to bring me down. I'll never know what makes this man, with all the love that his heart can stand, dream of ways to throw it all away. Gravity is working against me. And gravity wants to bring me down. And twice as much ain't twice as good, and can't sustain like one half could. It's wanting more, it's gonna send me to my knees. And twice as much ain't twice as good, and can't sustain like one half could. It's wanting more that's gonna send me to my knees. Oh, gravity, stay the hell away from me. Oh, gravity has taken better men than me. How can that be? Just keep me where the light is. Just keep me where the light is. Just keep me where the light is. And keep me where the light is. Come on, keep me where the light is. Just keep me where the light is. Come on, keep me where the light is.
Amanda Benjamin, great job. I love when you do those
Beautiful.
coffee shop feeling,
Mhm.
like just chill.
Just a little, you know. I love.
Yeah, very
coffee.
like autumn, winter coffee shop day,
Yes.
like listening to. Yeah, that was really great.
Oh,
I
thanks.
haven't listened to any John Mayer songs in so long. So it's so fun to hear covers of things you haven't heard in a while because you listen to the lyrics like so
Right?
more intent. Like you hear the lyrics in a different way.
Especially when you're
And-
like, oh, I'm going to think about this in like in the context of what we've been talking about. Like
Mhm.
gravity suddenly has a different meaning.
Mhm. Yeah,
to you right
absolutely.
now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's fun.
All right. Well, great job, Amanda. And we'll
Thanks.
jump into a few more time slip stories and a little cherry on top before we hit our duet and say goodnight. But I want to start where we kind of left off last episode when we did Haunted Spaces. We did some Queen Mary stories.
Ooh.
And this is one I'm not sure if I mentioned in the last episode, but I definitely didn't go into details. A little time slip that happened to someone who worked there as a tour guide. This is told by, and I'm going to read my account because I feel like I'm doing a disservice to people by paraphrasing stories that they told online, but that we are sharing here on the episode. This is from a gentleman by the name of Bill Sauter. He was a maritime historian and archivist. He spent a lot of times with Titanic exhibitions, and
I've met him. I've
Have you
met
really?
him.
Oh, how cool.
So, I am so sorry to, and I'm just like, but I had
No.
an amazing conversation with him at a conference a couple of years ago. He's like Titanic expert of experts. Yeah. I've gotten to talk with him. That's so cool.
yeah. Well, he has this story that he tells on a YouTube video about Queen Mary ghost stories. He's got a few ghost stories, but this particular one seemed a lot like a time slip to me. He was working as a tour guide on the Queen Mary, and as he says it, as he tells it, it's the end of the day at sunset. We're getting ready to close the tour down and all go home. I was standing up on the bow, and the tourists are getting very sparse. You know, they're coming through every 15 minutes or so. So there's a lot of time just standing there and admiring things. You know, it's California and it's summer, so we're lightly dressed. And I'm basically looking back at the superstructure of the funnels and sort of just zoning out and not thinking about anything in particular. And then something happens. And it's very difficult to describe because it happens in a moment. As fast as you can clap your hands, it's gone. What happened was, as I was standing there looking aft, suddenly I was standing in that spot, but it's 1966. It's the end of the ship's life, and I can feel and see in a non-specific way the crewmen were in New York. It's the middle of winter. I'm freezing because I'm misdressed for the weather. There's snow on the deck. The crew is getting ready to cast off, and we're heading back to England. And I can feel this depression. They've retired the Mary, and they're going to retire the Elizabeth. And there's only one ship coming online, and that means guaranteed at least 50% of the crew is losing its job in a matter of months. What are they going to do? That was the ambient feeling I picked up at the same time I was seeing this. At the same time I was seeing this, I was up in the wheelhouse in the chart room, and I was looking over one of the ship's officers, and I remember he was standing at a chart table and had the chart out and a pencil and paper, and he was figuring something out. I don't know what it was. It was over like that. And at the same time, I'm down in the bakery. And I remember seeing a baker pick up a tray and put it in an oven. And then that was the image. And then I was down in the generator room. I was on the platform watching an engineer parallel two generators because they brought a second generator online. And now they're going to split the load at the same time. At the same time, I was in a cabin somewhere. I think it was one of the second class cabins. The steward had come in to run the hot and cold water taps before passengers arrived, because if a cabin hadn't been used in a while, there's a tendency for rust to collect and it'll bleed rusty water for about 10 seconds. You never want a passenger to see that. So the stewards had instructions to go ahead and do that. And I saw that, and bang, that was done. And in a moment, all these visions, which occurred simultaneously, there's no sound, no verbiage. There's also really no motion. It's like a series of still pictures. It was gone. It was just absolutely gone. And 10 seconds later, up comes the last set of tourists, and I give my spiel as usual. And then 5 minutes later, my supervisor arrives, and I go home. And that was his story about his Queen Mary time slip.
Oh, weird.
It's so curious. To have, this is one where like that's why I was so excited for it to be someone I've met, because I know him not only through talking to him, but like seeing him on documentaries for years. And so I know that he's a very reputable,
Right.
Very like intelligent, sophisticated, reliable person.
Mhm.
So it's, so that gives credence to the story in itself. But then also the idea of time slipping and then being aware of how things feel. That's such an interesting concept of like you're time slipping and you're aware of what the energy, it's like going back to what you were saying about energies. It's like, maybe it is about just energy that's emitted because he's picking up on these people's emotions.
And all simultaneously and all at once. Like he sees all these different scenes from that moment in time.
Right.
But as experienced by different crew members all at the same time, but in a different moment in time.
Yeah, that's really wild.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was if these things are true and they happen. Like, I would not be surprised if it did have something to do with energies, because even in like ghost stories, this person's like their life energy, like the things that that happen to them, like the stronger emotions, which would to me give out like a stronger energy, cause, like a repeat, like the idea of like repeating loops of time, like a ghost will repeat this time in their life because of what happened to them, and what are ghosts probably but energy, so it's the same thing. Like time slips, I could see it having that same idea of it being energy.
Well, it's like what you just said kind of clicked something in my brain too, that it's, talking about matter and physics too. It's like energy being displaced. Does it have to go? It has to go somewhere. I mean, it's the same, it's like the 21 grams that disappear from our bodies when we die, apparently, it's like where the weight of like, does energy have weight? And then where does that weight get displaced to? I don't know. And again, I don't have a scientific brain, so it's hard for me to verbalize these questions, but maybe energy has to go somewhere. And just on that day, that energy floated into his brain or his heart or whatever.
Yeah. Because who's to say energy can't
imprinted.
like travel through time?
Like an imprint. Yeah.
An imprint on the ship, on the stone and tape or whatever, and just goes through you in a second. You guys should definitely do an episode on stone tape theory. It's very very interesting. There's a lot of research. I have I won't give a last name, but I have a listener to Unsinkable. His name is Alec, and he has talked to me about he works at, and again, I won't give any identifying details, but he works at a museum that is in the South that has to do with like the history of slavery and like, more like 1800s. And he told me that he was giving a tour one day, looked over, and he just saw like half of a man across the room in like old timey garb, like old style hat, like overalls, and just half of a man projected down the hallway.
That's weird.
And this isn't someone, he was like, I'm not into paranormal. I'm not into haunt, it's not an interest of mine. Right. But he's like, am I going crazy? Like, what's going on? But he just had this experience. And same situation, like just that energy was floating around, and he had whatever receptors that day to pick up on that. And and he never saw it before, never saw it again, but
Interesting.
We could talk about this when I tell my next story, but like how many ghost stories could be time slips?
Yes.
Because the people who experience time slips often talk about being seen by people in that time and them looking at them weird, like you don't belong here kind of a thing.
Like, are you the ghost? Like, do we become the ghosts in
Right.
those stories? Yeah.
Right.
And I always wonder, like, if that happens, would they remember? Do they not remember? Is it because you're maybe creating some kind of parallel timeline? You should think if these time slips happened and a whole room full of people saw you, all these people would be like, that was weird, like, and there'd be some stories about it. But maybe you enter some kind of parallel universe. It's not the same as yours. So that story never happens here.
Is it possible to enter one at the same time? And by the way, my son slipped me a note under the door. That's what I went to get. He wanted, I'm like the celebrity upstairs. They're like watching it upstairs. So they're like,
he's like, Mommy, when will you be done?
I know.
No,
he's like, Mom, come make chicken nuggets.
I know, right? Like, where's my dinner? No, he says, I love you. It's so sweet. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Lorelai, for bringing my drink. I appreciate
Thank you, Robbie, Lorelai, and John for lending LA to us for this episode.
It's
We're having
incredible.
so much fun. I feel like we need to have you on every episode.
I know.
And I mean, I won't, you know what? I wouldn't say no. You know how some people in that situation are like, oh, no. I would say yes. No pressure. But,
you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Joining the cast for season 2, LA Beadles.
Well, we should do a Titanic
yes, please.
co-host episode together, because there's so many paranormal stories when it comes to Titanic, and some of them are kind of time travel-y, time slippy sort of, as that one. I mean, like, that's a direct Titanic connection with Bill Sauter, for example. But yeah, I definitely think there's something to that. I think, and again, having met him, he doesn't strike me as someone that would make up a frivolous story. Like, he strikes me as someone that would only put something online if he really felt like there was truth to it.
And that's just one of them. This video, I'll put the link to it in the show notes when we release the podcast. But he tells several ghost stories where there's one where he's working in the pool room and he sees a 17-year-old girl that just disappears. And then there's another one where like he feels a force like push him. And then his third story was that time slippy one. And yeah, it's pretty wild. And we talk about historical places that, so many feelings and so much these places have an energy, and they could possibly be recording them. And maybe some hauntings are actually time slips. Maybe they're imprints of the past. But we have another friend who had an experience on the Queen Mary. And this is one of my best friends, Dan Franklin, who we all know is a professional musician, singer, songwriter,
incredible
guitar player, half of the country music powerhouse that is Franklin Wall. He released an album called "The Best Ride of Your Life" many years ago. I want to say 6 or 7 years ago. He probably says it in his story, but I was so blessed. He invited me to open for him as a stand-up comedian that night. And I got to make my stand-up comedy debut in the main ballroom of the Queen Mary for this show. And it was such a great experience. And Dan had an experience that night that he shared with me later. And when we were planning this episode, I hit him up and I said, hey, would you mind sending in a video, a story for the show for us to share? And he said, absolutely. And so I'm actually passing the baton off directly to Mr. Dan Franklin to tell you his story in his own words. And here he is.
Anyone that knows me knows that I'm a fairly skeptical person. So when I tell you this story, just know that in my heart, I'm certain that there's a fairly logical explanation for this. I just don't know what it is. Back in 2015 in September, when I released an album called The Best Ride of Your Life. I did this on the Queen Mary, and it was a great show. We had a huge band. It was a wonderful night. About 500 people or so showed up to enjoy this with us. It was great. But anyone that's played music on the Queen Mary knows that process of getting your musical equipment on and off that ship can be quite difficult. And I was staying on the ship that night. My stateroom was in the aft of the ship, and the show was more in the fore of the ship. And so was also up a level, a deck. So when I broke down, I realized that I needed to get my stuff into an elevator and then down a floor and then back to my room. And I had 2 trips to do. And so I pack up my stuff. I go out to the elevator. And this elevator has like a little tiny staircase to get up to the elevator. So you cannot just cart your ramp right into it. You have to get to the elevator, call the elevator, unload your gear, put the cart in the elevator, reload the cart in the elevator, get inside, go down, and then cart all the way to my stateroom, unload the thing, go back, and I don't want to do this again. It took forever. So the second time I remember, oh, there's that other freight elevator that's in the kitchen behind the stage. I wonder if that has stairs or if I can just go straight down there. So I cart up my second load. I go back to the elevator. I call it. It shows right up. Door opens right up, and I get inside. This elevator is exactly large enough for me and my cart. It's one of those elevators that has kind of like the horse blanket, the moving blanket, on the walls. Total utility. I get inside and I hit the deck below me, and the door closes and nothing happens. And I'm just sitting in this elevator for a long time, and I'm just pushing the button. It's going nowhere. Nothing's happening. I start pushing other buttons. Nothing's happening. And I'm about to get my phone out and try to call somebody to tell them to come get me, because I'm certain that I'm stuck in this thing, when the elevator just starts moving and nothing lights up on the panel. It just starts moving. And I'm like, okay, finally. But we're going further than one deck, and it just keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going. And I'm like, there's no way that the ship is this big. This thing just keeps going. And then we stop on a floor and the door opens up. It's not my deck. It is a white, whiter than white room with really bright lights and an old sign that says E as an elephant, E deck. On either side of this white wall are 2 hallways that go back, and they're really, really dark. And you hear almost nothing except for just this very, very faint talking down these hallways. And I'm trying to make out what they're saying. I'm like, I don't want to get out here. This is not my deck. I start pushing buttons and nothing is happening. This elevator door is not closing, and it's just creeping me out. And I'm like, this has got to be the slowest elevator ever. I'm pushing buttons, and nothing's happening. And I'm starting to feel really weird. And then the door closes. And I'm like, this is great. I'll just go back up. And so I push the original deck where I know the stage is, because I know I can get off there and go do the original thing. And it's not going anywhere again. And it's another couple minutes of me really freaking out and trying to I have no cell reception at this point. I can't get a phone call out. And so eventually the top button in this elevator lights up. Just the very, very top floor. And I'm like, okay, great. I'll just go there and do whatever. So it goes all the way to the top, and I get out, and I pull my card out, and I'm like, wait, this is like the promenade. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get back down. And then the elevator door closes, and I turn around, and I'm like, I'm going to call the elevator, but the call button has been boarded over and shellacked. I cannot call the elevator from this promenade, and there's a sign on it that says freight elevator no longer in use. I'm so frustrated. I wander out of the promenade. I wander all the way back to these other elevators. Turns out they're the original elevators that have a little tiny staircase, and I have to do the same thing that I did the first time anyway after all of this. And I go down, and I go all the way back. It's the end of the night, and I'm telling the story that I just told you to my parents, who were staying there that night as well. And my father's looking at this map of the Queen Mary that they provided him. And he says, E deck. And I'm like, yeah, E, elephant. And he's like, you sure you don't mean D deck? There's a D deck. There's an M. There's an A. There's no E on this entire map. And I'm like, I am beyond. I stared at that sign that said E deck for a long time. It's not on the ship. So, where did I go? What happened? Why me? What happened that night? What do you think? I don't know. Queen Mary, right?
The Queen Mary, right?
That was awesome.
Where did he go? Where do you think?
I mean, I think it reminded me so much of the accounts I read of the Liverpool ones that I studied a little bit, that this is exactly what these people expressed, is just suddenly I'm somewhere I don't recognize something, and it, like, that the oddity of the sensation of just being somewhere where you don't recognize anything and you don't have your foothold in reality. In this case, it seems like it seems to me like it was a little more like, okay, I'm just trying to get something done. And like these weird things are happening, but I'm going to keep moving forward. And then sort of realizing maybe after the fact some of it, but yeah, it seems to echo in all of these stories, and with his particularly. And so he told it so well, like, what do you do? It's like, why me? Why? Yeah. That's the question. Like, why did I have this moment in my life? Why did this happen? Mm-hmm. And maybe there's no reason. Maybe it's just random. It's just completely random. But where did he go?
That's one thing is I don't think it's entirely out of the range of possibility that there is an E deck, and they just don't put it on the map that they give people who are staying as guests.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the whole elevator moving on its own, not moving when you press it, that kind of stuff.
I mean, that could be why it was shut down.
It keeps taking everybody to the floor. We didn't tell them.
Listen, this elevator is taking people to 1947. So
I know. We gotta shut it down.
Shut it down, Captain. Well, thank you, Dan, for sharing that. And of course, I love the Queen Mary. And as the sequel to my original film, The Haunted Man, takes place on the Queen Mary, I'm excited to shoot there someday, as I am determined to film the sequel to The Haunted Man on the Queen Mary. But just an awesome place with a lot of great energy and a lot to be explored, a lot of mysteries. But we will shoot way up north to Canada for the next story that I found on a YouTube channel called Paranormal Rising. The episode is called Glitch Stories, Time Slip Stories number 70. And trust me, there's like hundreds of them. So 70 is probably early on. Like I mentioned, there's so many of these stories out there. I had no idea. And the way they get these stories is listeners submit them to their website, paranormalrising.com. They don't give credit, so I wish I could give credit, but this is an anonymous story that was told, and I will read it exactly as it was told on Paranormal Rising, Time Slip Stories number 70. Some friends and I used to drink in this really old, abandoned, dilapidated farmhouse. It was about a half an hour walk out of our hometown of Coldhill, Alberta, Canada. It was a place we could drink and chill all night and not have to worry about cops and stuff like that, although the house itself was a bit dangerous, if you know what I mean, because it was totally collapsed everywhere. It was pretty much falling apart. We always sat on the top floor as it was the least amount of debris, and there was a nice wide open area where we could all sit in a circle. We'd bring a flashlight, but we would turn it off since we got up in our little area. When we got up in our little area upstairs, just in case somebody happened to drive by, you'd notice something suspicious might be happening in the house. Although not even once did a car drive by ever on nights we were there. If they did, it would have been noticeable. It was miles away from any other light source, and it was dead quiet other than the crickets chirping. Anyway, one night, I'm pretty sure that it was a Saturday, probably around 2 or 3 in the morning, or around there. There was a group of 7 or 8 of us, and we heard the door open, and we heard some chatter. We were like, oh, who the heck is that? And we quickly hid our booze, sat as still and quiet as we could, and hoped that nobody was going to come upstairs. They did. And this is where it gets really, really, really weird. Although it was dark with no lights, so we could easily see each other across the room because of the moon and the starlight, and our eyes had adjusted. This Hutterite family, and for those who don't know who the Hutterites are, they're sort of like the Amish folk who are basically wearing the same style of clothes, and they live in colonies and farms and stuff like that. They come walking up the stairs. They're chattering to each other, but it wasn't in English. I think it might have been German, but I really can't say, except the two little girls, I guess they were around 6 or 7, they were speaking plain English to each other. They come up into the open room where we were and started looking around. We were crapping our pants at this point. There was no way in hell they would not be able to see us, just sitting there in a circle. But they didn't. They would look right at you, but it was almost like they were looking through you, and like we didn't even exist at one point. At one point, one of the little girls was standing right in front of me and said excitedly, "This is going to be my room." We were all just sitting there, frozen solid, looking at each other like, is this really happening? They continue to kind of walk around and look at stuff. It seemed like they were checking out a new house they were going to move into or something. But if you saw the state of the house, you'd know 100% that that was not the case. It was far beyond repair. Oh, and as I mentioned, it was 2 or 3 in the morning. Why would anybody bring their family to look at a dilapidated house that early with no electricity, no lights? So they walk around for about 10 minutes or so, chatting away, seemingly oblivious to us. Again, there was no way they couldn't see us. But finally, they walked back down the stairs. We heard the door open and shut. And silence. No vehicle driving away, nothing, just crickets again. We were like, did that just happen? Or where the hell did they even go? A few of us decided to go investigate. We go downstairs with our trusty flashlight, go outside, and there's nothing. No vehicle, no tire tracks in the gravel, no people, no vehicle driving away, nobody's walking away, just nothing. And this wasn't even a minute after we heard the door shut. If they were on foot, they wouldn't have made it that far. If they were driving, we would have seen or heard the vehicle pull up, and also we would have heard it drive away, as this was a flat, open prairie grassland. You can see for miles. We would have been able to see either those people walking away or driving away without any doubt. There is no way they just disappeared like that. And at some key points to take away from this very, very strange event is that this house was miles away from other houses. There was no vehicle. It was like we weren't there. And it was like we weren't even there. We looked sketchy. Seriously, we had mohawks, tattoos, piercings all over our faces, leather jackets with nails and stuff that were coming out of our clothing. There was just no way that they wouldn't have seen us in this abandoned house at night and not been scared of us. It was also 3 a.m. Sunday morning or Saturday night. Why the heck would you walk miles through the mud with your young children to come check out a house that's an old dilapidated farmhouse at the time of the event with not so much as a flashlight? Last I heard, the house is still there, sideways from the wind. But there's no freaking way anybody in their right minds would go into trying to fix it up. It's been over 20 years since this happened, and everyone who was there, all my friends are still scratching our heads as to what happened that night because it was so strange. But that was only when I heard that it was still there. I'm not sure if it actually is still there. I tried finding it on Google Maps, but all the houses in the area are definitely occupied. It looks like maybe it was torn down and a new neighborhood was built there. And that is his story of that event. And I can't wait to hear your thoughts.
Oh, I really like that one.
Yeah, you did a really good job of reading that one. It was like you with the music too. It was like I like put myself there. I could like,
Oh, yeah.
I was like sitting there having a drink at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then suddenly, you set the scene really well.
How many people did you say were there?
He said 7 or 8 of them, and
And they all saw it. They all
got-
claimed to.
We've talked about so many times on this podcast, like how important shared experiences are, because it's one thing to have have an experience like Dan did, but imagine a friend was with him and they could collaborate. And like we talk about collaborate. Collaborate
would be making up the story. So no.
Right. But yeah, he says they still all talk about it, and they're like, what happened to us that night? If there were 7 or 8 of them and they experienced this together. Yeah. Because, if you're drinking and it's 2 or 3 in the morning, that was the first thing I thought was like, what were you drinking? But if everybody saw the same thing and still talking about it years later, that's a little crazy. A little bit.
It reminds me of a story I heard on, there's a great podcast called Real Life Ghost Stories. It's actually kind of tragic. It's a husband and wife team that did it. And the husband died a couple of years ago, but the wife, her name is Emma. She's kept up the podcast, which I think is really brave of her. And she's phenomenal. Real Life Ghost Stories. Yeah.
He was the guy who talked like, whoa.
Dan died. Yeah.
She died? I used to listen to that a long time ago.
Yeah. I was on a trip. It was like 2 summers ago, coming it was like a little bit out of COVID, and we were like very carefully traveling and like staying in Airbnbs and like wearing masks. But I was listening to a podcast while I was like working out in this Airbnb, and all of a sudden, like she comes on the latest episode and shares this. And I was just shocked because I had been listening at that point for a long time and loved them. But they had a story once where I think it was a listener story. And they had written in, and they bought a house that was, I think, built in the 1800s. And the kitchen, I think, was like pretty much the original, like kitchen space. But they said late one night they came in and this was probably a time slip now that I'm thinking about it. They came into their kitchen and there was a woman at their sink, and she was in kind of old timey clothing, and turned around and looked at her and looked alarmed. And that was sort of what that story was about, was like, who's the ghost, like she had slipped into this previous existence of this house, but that woman is still existing somewhere in some realm. And to her, this like futuristic person was probably the ghost, but it sort of made me think of that, of like, just, yeah, you maybe were existing, in realms that are just like a hair's or just like a breath apart from one another. And maybe sometimes they just interact, and like, what is time, which is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But
that's what I was going to say too with that. Like, cause really when you start thinking about time travel and time, and like, we get more and more understanding of time, but I mean, time is really just our experience of it. Like, time doesn't actually exist. It's really weird, like the whole topic. And, I've always said, like, I always wonder if people who are psychic, or now we're talking about like ghosts or things like that, are, is it actually that some people just can experience time in a different way? Because again, it's just about our perception of it. So maybe that there's something in our brain that clicks on and off sometimes.
Or is it, it's like, I think about like the people always say, like, like time may not be a line. It might be a circle.
Each one has its own problem. There's even like a spiral. Time is a spiral. Like, there's lots of different ways. Like, because we talked about this when we had the Rosa Hope on the show, when we're talking about.
Oh yeah.
And we talked a bit about that, and she was like, no circular time because of free will. And I was like, well, who knows?
But like, who knows? I mean, it makes me think of have y'all seen the movie Arrival? Have you ever seen that movie?
I haven't seen it.
It's one of my. Wait, what did you say? Have you seen it, Paul?
It's been a minute, but yeah.
Like, I always think about that movie when I think about this question, because it's so much about like kind of what is time and what are our lives like laid out on what like we think is linear time. But yeah, I don't know. It's moments like that I go back into moments in my own life, and I'm sort of like, have I had time slips and not realized it? Because I have, there's definitely been a few moments in my life, like, my husband is going to laugh when he hears this, but one time we were driving in Texas, where we used to live, just down a highway we drive by all the time. And there was a man on the side of the road on a horse carrying like this big, like cross, like a cross you would see like at a church or like planted in front of a church. And I turned to him and I was like, do you see that? Cause I mean, I was ready to send myself to the loony bin, you know? And he said, yeah, I see that. But he wasn't weirded out by it at all. It was like, you know, kind of rural Texas. He was like, oh, I'm sure it's just related to like a church event or something. But I don't know. I've had a few moments like that where I've seen something sort of out of place, and now I'm thinking maybe we all have tiny little time slips throughout our lives because maybe things are just glitching all around us.
Would we ever know?
No.
And we'd never know. Yeah.
That brings me to the cherry on top of these three stories.
Yes.
My father, who a lot of you have met out there, if you're listening or watching, you know, he's an adorable, adorable man. He plays saxophone. He's played saxophone his whole life for the Air National Guard Band, and he's been a music teacher, and his music has always been a huge part of his life, and he's always said that someday, when he retires, which he finally has, so hopefully he will do what he said, he might consider working for the Disney parks. And he has performed at the Disney parks a few times with the Air National Guard Band. There's actually one day, which is super cool. I'll remember it forever. I was doing the Aladdin storytelling show in Adventureland, and Dad was in the park performing as well. And there was a time that lined up in the middle of the day where we were both performing at the same time in Disneyland, which was super cool to be able to say my dad and I performed at the same time in Disneyland one time. But he had a dream once, and he told me about it. He dreamt he was playing in a saxophone quartet in Disneyland, dressed as Keystone Cops. And he remembered what it looked like backstage. He remembered details from areas that the public couldn't access. One thing that he remembers that I tell him does not exist is like underground tunnels, the Disneyland underground world that everyone talks about that isn't true. There are buildings that go underground, but there's no underground city or tunnels. But he remembered in detail a lot of things that the general public wouldn't remember. But the one thing was, he was saying, you know, we were a sax quartet of police officers. And I said, that would be cool, because there is a sax quartet of firemen. They're the Firehouse Sax Quartet. And maybe one day there will be police officers. Well, fast forward to our friend Matthew King is on the internet one day, and he finds a photograph. Apparently, before the Firehouse Quartet, there was a Keystone Cop sax quartet in Disneyland. And here's a photo from 1978 of that quartet, and there's right next to it a photo of my father playing the baritone sax. A member of sax quartet in 1978 looks surprisingly similar.
It does. It looks a whole lot like him.
What is going on? What is
the glasses?
what is
everything?
So it's a photo of there was a Keystone.
I mean, I've heard what you said, but my brain is like malfunctioning because it looks so much like him.
Yeah,
it does. Like I said,
And
right
he's
down to like
the tallest
glasses
guy.
and
Next to these other guys, he's not very tall, which he's not the tallest. It's pretty it's pretty wild.
maybe it's a relative.
Just that he found this photo, and my dad had this dream. Like, could there have been a slip where for that night my dad went and played in Disneyland with the Keystone Cop Sax Quartet?
Yeah, that's really cool.
I'm just gonna. It may be the half cocktail I have in me, but I'm gonna say that's possible. What in the world? What does your family think about this? Like, what does your dad think? Is he freaked out by it? What is his take on it?
My dad's a skeptic. He's like, that couldn't have been me, obviously. So
Your mom must think something, though. Your mom's so open-minded.
She was in the chat earlier. She might be gone now. But
Aw.
yeah, that is my little Disneyland family possible time slip story.
How cool is that?
That's pretty. That sort of gave me goosebumps. Like, I don't know. That it looks a lot like your dad.
It does. And you could say, well, if you put the costume on and glasses on and made somebody stand this way and hold a sax in front of their face, it could look like anybody.
I mean, yeah, it's fair because you can't see if there's hair and you can't see, the saxophone obscures some of the chin but it looks a lot like him.
It's a lot of fun to speculate.
I like it.
No,
I think I'm in.
Oh, she
my
is.
mom's in the chat, and she says,
"Oh, what did she say?"
He's saying right now it's not me.
It is not. But maybe you time travel in like the next 20 years. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. And Dad, you're retired now, so go work for Disneyland.
And then give us all free tickets.
Yeah, sign us in,
please. Anybody out there who works for Disney can sign me in. I would love to go.
I second that.
The time slip marathon is coming to an end, but of course we close every episode with a duet, and for this episode we picked a little Coldplay, Clocks.
Yes, I love this one.
Because clocks.
Because clocks. Time. You got it. Actually, like when I was listening to it, because I was like, I was thinking about songs. We just did deep cuts, songs about time, right? And that one came up a bunch. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of interesting actually when you start listening to the words and talking about like different places or things, events. Like, I was like, oh yeah, totally. You could be talking about going through different times with this. So. Yeah.
Good. And Amanda, I applaud you always because you're always at the mercy of whatever I send you. So, as usual, I haven't seen or heard the edited version yet, but
hopefully it's okay.
Here is Amanda and I performing virtually together while we were apart. Coldplay's Clocks.
Lights go out and I can't be saved. Tides that I tried to swim against brought me down upon my knees. Oh, I beg and plead, singing, come out of things unsaid. Shoot an apple off my head and trouble that can't be named. Tigers waiting to be tamed, singing, you are, you are.
Confusion never stops. Closing walls and ticking clocks, gonna come back and take you home. Could not stop that you now know, singing, come out upon my seas. Cursed missed opportunities. Am I a part of the cure? Or am I a part of the disease? Singing, you are, you are, you are. You are.
compares, and nothing else compares. Home, where I wanted to go. Home, where I wanted to go. Home, where I wanted to go. Home, where I wanted to go.
Yay.
I love what you did with the end there.
Oh, thanks.
Job. Amanda Benjamin for editing that together and adding herself to my madness. Thank you so much.
I love it. It was great. And I love like the same thing like we talked about earlier, like that just that little like coffee shop-ish feeling, that acoustic version of the song's so nice.
I appreciate all the work that you did, and ladies and gentlemen, give it up for our special guest today and the new cast member for season 2.
We're definitely bringing it back.
You joke, but I don't do it.
It's not a joke. I'm not joking.
No, this is so fun, and I read a lot about the paranormal, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, including yours. And so it's fun to finally be able to be on one. Like I feel like my voice, I've mostly just absorbed and consumed it, and to get to talk about it in a venue is really fun. And I know I've kind of been like throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall and throwing things out. It's just because I've read so much, and to get to talk about it in terms of specific stories and, throw things around with the two of y'all, it's been really fun.
Well, and that's why I was like, Paul, let's start this podcast. Cause I was like watching all this content and listening and same thing, reading. And I was like, I want to talk about this. Like, I thought that was the whole idea. It was like,
get to put your voice. It's so, that's why it's so wonderful what y'all have done is amazing. Like create this, just a show where you showcase your talents, you talk to each other, but then you get to just throw some ideas out there about, some of it's from the internet, some of it's sort of folklore, some of it's, we live in a world where we're constantly inundated with so much information and so many stories. So it's nice to be able to talk it out and think about what it means in terms of our own lives, in terms of how we think about things or live our lives. So it's just, thank you. It's been really fun to be able to do that. So
It's been amazing to have you. And, when you were a guest on Cove, we talked about your whole background, and I didn't even mention here on this episode that you have your doctorate in history. We should be calling you Dr. Leslie Ann.
Oh,
but she's
pardon.
A scholar and a doctor, and we love that you're just having a new fresh voice in here was just so fun, but also just your wealth of knowledge from all the reading of the books. And you're such a great storyteller, as anybody who listens to your podcast Unsinkable knows. And it was just such a pleasure to have you here, and we will absolutely have you back anytime you want.
I would love to anytime, just let me know. I would love to hop back on and right back to you guys. I think you both are such amazing storytellers, and I have spent many an afternoon or morning on my treadmill listening to your podcast, and it's like a comfort listen. It's so soothing. And the episode that you did about the what was his name? The man that just disappeared from the nightclub and no one ever heard
Brian
from him
Schaffer.
again.
Love that one.
I was on treadmill like one morning listening to this and just like, oh my gosh, what? And then of course I had to Google like 20 things after I listened. But yeah, it's always such a fun and refreshing listen. And I get to deep dive into things I haven't heard about before. And you guys are such great storytellers.
Thanks.
And it's so fun. The music is such a nice addition to the setting. And so I think, I mean, and I hope that if some of my listeners will discover your podcast through this, you know, I shared the link on Instagram, but I'll also make sure to share it when you guys post the edited episode and everything. So I hope some of them find you guys because this is really fun.
Thanks. Yeah, we hope so too.
Well, they will for sure, as you are a new co-host for season 2.
You know, and then 3:00 in the morning, Amanda and Paul receive a 20-page email from LA about all of her episode ideas.
Hey,
No,
like
I'm not like that. I'm not like that. Don't worry.
We're not. We're like very like, oh, what are we gonna do this week? But
yeah, no, that's how I am.
But we should schedule. Like I keep being like, we should take this break to actually like schedule.
Make a schedule, yeah. Let's do it.
That'd be smart.
No, but for real, I'll open. I mean, anytime you have something you think I might throw some perspective on, or if you want me to tell my crazy story.
Oh yes, absolutely. I want to hear all about your haunted house.
You keep talking about it like you're going to be a guest, but no, you're going to be the third co-host.
Oh, I'll do it. For real. You know, and it's funny. I'm very busy, and I'm right. Paul knows I'm writing right now. I'm writing a book, but I will do it. I will. There are certain things. No, when you're passionate about something, you will say yes. And it's like what I talked about when we did the co-casting for Cove. You say yes when it's something you're passionate. It's like the clock will make room and make time for things when you're passionate about it. And that's how I feel about things like this. Like there's some things I wouldn't say yes to at this point in my life, but I totally would on this. So just like, but no, for real, this has been just an absolute pleasure. It's been so much fun.
Great.
And it has been such a pleasure to have you. Thank you, LA, for being on the show. And thank you to everyone for joining us on this episode of the Magical Mystery Hour.
This concludes the first season of the Magical Mystery Hour podcast.
A huge thank you to everyone who has watched, listened, and supported the show in any way.
If you've enjoyed this season's stories and don't want to miss out on season 2, please be sure you're subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform.
Of course, as always, please leave a positive review and help more people who like this kind of show find our Magical Mystery Hour.
We'd like to thank producer Craig Jackman and our social media team, Dari Mills and Christina Beelan, for their promotional support.
Thank you again to this episode sponsor, Emily Thatcher, and a big thank you to David Benjamin for composing and recording our theme music.
Until the next season of mysteries, good night.